98, 99, 100, I'm out of here. A triumphant shout echoed through the compartment. Sergei Belyayev, nicknamed Black, didn't even turn his head. He methodically, with the precise touch of a surgeon, cleaned his assault rifle. Every click, every hand movement was a ritual honed to automatism. Opposite him, on the next bunk, Viktor Melnik, also known as Doc, smirked, watching the revelry at the far end of the barracks. There, by the duty officer's table, a crowd of newbies and almost done soldiers from the neighboring regular motorized rifle company had gathered. One of them, lanky and scrawny Ivan Smirnov, who'd earned the mocking nickname Twig for his physique, was reverently smearing the last 100th dab of Forest Balm toothpaste onto his homemade calendar. "Kids," Black tossed off, not taking his eyes off the bolt carrier. His voice was even and low, devoid of emotion. "A circus for boots." "Come on, Gray," Doc said, putting down his book. "It's tradition. It's kind of nice. 100 days until discharge. Everyone goes through it." "We aren't everyone." A metallic edge crept into Black's voice. He clicked the bolt, checking its travel. The sound was dry and sharp, like a gunshot in a confined space. "For us, 100 days means 3 planned deployments, exercises at Ashuluk training range, and maybe another trip. For them, it's 100 details in the mess hall and painting curbs. Do you feel the difference?" Their compartment, designed for just 6 members of a special forces unit, was noticeably different from the general quarters. It didn't smell of sour foot wraps and cheap cologne. The air was saturated with the scent of gun oil, ozone from the working electronics, and a subtle aroma of expensive protein that Doc mixed for himself after every workout. Instead of faded posters depicting the workings of the AK-74, the walls were adorned with diagrams of Tactical Combat Casualty Care, TCCC, and maps with designated symbols. Their service was different. Their world was different. "The elitism is oozing," Doc chuckled, but without malice. He knew his friend. Black didn't despise other soldiers. He simply lived in a different system of coordinates, where sentimentalities like toothpaste calendars were an unacceptable luxury, junk cluttering the processor. "It's not elitism, it's professionalism," Sergei retorted, placing his rifle in a special case. "They count the days, we count the rounds. That's the whole difference. Let's go to the box, warm up. We need to work on entry into the left corner. You hesitated for half a second yesterday." They called the breaching range the box, a complex of buildings with electronic targets, motion sensors, and cameras that recorded every action. It was their sandbox, their temple. Half an hour later, they were standing at the entrance to a 2-story gray concrete building. They were in full gear. Defender 2, body armor, all-tin helmets with lowered visors, vests packed with magazines and grenades. In their hands were their faithful AK-100 series rifles with red dot sights and tactical attachments. "Team, mission!" Major Popov's amplified voice blared from the loudspeakers, the head of their training center. "2 terrorists in the building, 1 hostage. Hostage is on the 2nd floor, in the far room. The terrorists have suicide belts. Detonation equals mission failure. Time to complete, 90 seconds. Begin." Black nodded to Doc. Not a word, just a look. They understood each other without commands. It was a brotherhood forged not in the smoking lounge over war stories, but under fire. Even if simulated, but no less demanding for it. Sergei was the first to step into the darkness of the doorway. His movements were fluid, predatory, like a panther, not a single unnecessary sound. He didn't walk. He flowed from shadow to shadow. The rifle barrel moved with his gaze, scanning the space. Corridor to the right, room to the left. Doc covered the rear. His sector was the rear hemisphere and the staircase to the 2nd floor. Suddenly, a target popped out from behind the corner of the room on the left. A red LED on the head. An enemy. Green on the chest. A hostage. This one was red. A split-second flash, and a short burst from Black's rifle struck the head precisely. The target retreated back behind the wall with a beep. Clear. He exhaled into his throat microphone. Roger. Movement on the stairs. Doc replied just as quietly. They worked as a single mechanism. Black controlled the first floor. Doc was already climbing the stairs, hugging the wall. No fuss, no haste. 90 seconds was an eternity for them. They were used to making decisions in fractions of a second. On the second floor, a long corridor with 3 doors. According to Popov's intel, the hostage was in the far room. That meant the terrorist could be in either of the others. Black gestured. He'd take the left, Doc the right. They'd breach the center one together. Kicking the door open with his shoulder, Sergei burst inside. An empty room. Simultaneously, Doc checked his, also empty. Only the last one remained. Breach, Black commanded. Doc crouched by the door, ready to roll inside. Sergei raised his leg to kick, and at that moment, the phone in his vest pocket vibrated. For a second, for a tiny fraction of a moment, his concentration faltered. It was unacceptable. He always muted his phone before work. Always. But today, after the morning briefing about the 100 days, something went wrong with his internal clock. A crash. The door flies off its hinges. Inside are 2 figures. One is sitting on a chair with a bag over his head, the hostage. The other, with an automatic rifle, stands beside him. A red diode. Black's shot and the terrorist's shot rang out almost simultaneously. Sergei's bullet hit its mark, but on his own body armor, a red sensor lit up. Wounded. "Belyaev, you're hit!" Popov roared through the speakers. "Melnik, extraction!" Doc grabbed Sergei by the arm, pulling him towards the exit. "Failure," Popov stated, as they emerged from the box. "Belyaev, what was that?" "You entered the room half a step slower. You exposed yourself. Why?" Black removed his helmet. His face, usually unreadable, was grim. He remained silent. Saying he was distracted by the phone's vibration would be tantamount to admitting professional incompetence. "I made a mistake, Comrade Major," he answered hoarsely. Popov gave him a long, scrutinizing look. The major knew his men better than they knew themselves. He saw that it wasn't a simple mistake. "Mistakes here, Belyaev, cost lives there. In Syria, targets don't beep, they shoot back, and you won't have sensors on your armor. Debriefing in an hour. Dismissed." They walked to the barracks in silence. Doc sensed his friend's tension. "Seri, what's wrong? I've never seen you like this. You're like, not here." "Everything's fine," Black grunted, quickening his pace. "What do you mean, fine? You got shot by a plastic dummy. You, the guy who could take down 2 targets on the move during training. Spill it." Sergei stopped, running a hand over the back of his closely cropped head. He looked at Doc, and a hint of bewilderment flickered in his usually cold eyes. "The phone. It vibrated." "So what?" "It happens." "It was my mother," Black interrupted. "She never calls at this time. Never." He pulled out an old-fashioned push-button Nokia, permitted on base, a missed call, and a message. With trembling fingers he opened it. The text was short, typed in haste. "Sergei, call urgently, Kate in trouble." Katya, his younger sister, a 17-year-old girl for whom he, in large part, joined the army and then signed a contract. So there would be money, so she could study, so she wouldn't want for anything. His heart plummeted somewhere into his stomach. He dialed his mother's number. The ringing seemed like an eternity. Mom, what's wrong? Sniffling could be heard on the other end. Serichenka, our Katyusha, got involved with bad people. She owes them a lot of money. They came yesterday, threatened us, said if we don't pay them back in a week, they'll take her. They'll take her to the woods. I'm afraid to go to the police. They said it would be worse. What to do, son? What to do? Black's world, so clear, precise, and logical, where there were only allies, enemies, the task and its completion, shattered. He listened to his mother's disjointed, horror-filled story, and the professional soldier, the elite special forces operative, gave way to the older brother, in whose veins icy fury was boiling. "How much?" he asked curtly. 100,000. Where are we going to get that kind of money, Sereja? 100,000. For him, a contract soldier in an elite unit, it wasn't an exorbitant sum. But it was there, on his bank card, and he was here, behind barbed wire, thousands of kilometers from home. "I'll sort it out, Mom. You hear me? Calm down. I'll sort it all out. Don't open the door to anyone. I'll be there soon." He ended the call. His hands trembled slightly. Doc looked at him with concern. "What is it?" "My sister. Trouble. Serious. Money? Yes, and more than that. I need to go." "Ask for compassionate leave. Popov's a decent guy, he should understand." Black gave a bitter smile. "Understand? He'll understand a telegram, notarized. A certificate from the hospital with an official stamp. But a call from a sobbing mother for him is unauthorized contact with relatives." But it was worth a try. It was the only legal way. Major Popov's office was as austere and functional as he was. A metal desk, a safe, a map of the combat zone on the wall. "Permission to enter, Comrade Major?" Black stood rigidly at attention. "Come in, Belyaev. I'm listening to your explanation regarding the failure." "Comrade Major, I request a short-term leave of absence for family reasons." Popov raised an eyebrow. "Grounds?" "My sister is in serious trouble. She's being threatened. I need to be home." "Threatened is not grounds, Belyaev. That's emotion. Where's the official document? A telegram from the military registration and enlistment office? A police report from your parents?" "They're afraid to go to the police, and there's no telegram. There was a call." The major leaned back in his chair. His gaze hardened. "Belyaev, you're in the army, in a special forces unit, not a kindergarten. The army is a system. It works according to orders and documents, not phone calls. You have 100 days until your discharge order. Go home. You can solve all your problems as a civilian. But now you are a soldier, and your family is your team. Your task is to be at 100% combat readiness. Today, you failed a basic exercise because of a phone call. What if that happened in combat? Who would cover Melnik? Who would extract the hostage? Comrade Major, I understand." "You understand nothing." Popov slammed his hand on the table. "You're thinking about your sister, but you need to be thinking about the mission. Emotions are a luxury we can't afford. I can't let one of the best fighters in the group go 100 days before key exercises because of his mother's panic. We need solid, documented grounds. They don't exist. Case closed. You may go." Sergei stood there, his fists clenched so tight his knuckles were white. Two people were fighting inside him. One, a disciplined soldier for whom the commander's order is law. The other, a brother who heard his mother's weeping in his ears and pictured Katya's frightened face. "Yes, sir," he squeezed out and, turning sharply, left the office. In the evening, the barracks was buzzing again. The freshmen were admiring the demobilization album that one of the old-timers was putting together. One of the pages boasted the inscription, 99 days left. Black sat on his bunk, staring blankly at the wall. Doc sat down next to him. Well? Denied. I figured. Sergey, don't be stupid. Don't do anything foolish. AWOL is desertion. For us, contractors from the office, it's not just the stockade. It's a court-martial. The end of your career. Disgrace. Criminal charges. What am I supposed to do? In Black's voice, for the first time in all his service, there was despair. Wait 99 days? Wait until my sister... He didn't finish. The words stuck in his throat. They gave me a week. A week, Vitya. Doc sighed heavily. He took a pack of cigarettes out of his nightstand, even though smoking was strictly forbidden in the barracks. He offered one to Sergey. Here, cosmonaut. Let's go behind the gym. They stood in the darkness, behind the solid wall of the sports complex. In the distance, the perimeter lights glowed, and a sentry walked his post. I have money, Doc said, exhaling smoke. We can collect from the guys. How much do you need? It's not just about the money. Black shook his head. These bastards. They need to be put in their place, so they forget the way to my house. That can't be done over the phone. You want to... I want to be there. Personally. They were silent. Doc finished his cigarette, threw the butt down and carefully ground it into the ground with his boot. You realize there's no turning back. If they catch you, and they will be looking, especially since you're not just Private Smirnov, you're a carrier of information, then that's it. I understand. And how are you going to do it? The perimeter is electrified, cameras, patrols every half hour. Black looked at him. His gaze became cold and focused again, like in the box before an assault. You forgot who taught us how to bypass all this? We ourselves passed a test 2 months ago on infiltrating a secured facility. I know every dead zone, every glitch in the patrol schedule. Doc understood. The decision had been made. This was no longer a conversation. This was operational planning. His friend, the best fighter in the group, was going to use all his skills not against the enemy, but against the system to which he had sworn allegiance. When? Doc asked quietly. Tonight, at 2 o'clock, the changing of the guard at the far checkpoint. There's a 7-minute window. Do you need help? Black shook his head. No. You stay here, and you cover for me. Say I'm sick, food poisoning in the mess hall. Buy me 12 hours, maximum. Okay. Doc nodded. Brotherhood was more important than regulations. There's a hole in the fence behind the Poal depot, an old one. They haven't fixed it. I'll bring you civilian clothes. Hide them in your duffel bag. They returned to the barracks. In the far corner, they were still giggling, discussing the upcoming demobilization. Someone was already calling his girlfriend, promising to return soon. For them, these 100 days were the home stretch to freedom. For Sergey Belyaev, a special forces fighter codenamed Black, they had just turned into the most dangerous mission of his life. He pulled a small backpack he had prepared in advance from under his mattress. He put in the change of clothes that Doc had brought, his documents, and a bank card. He acted quickly and silently, as he was used to, but inside everything contracted from a cold, unfamiliar feeling. It wasn't fear of the enemy. It was fear for his family, mixed with the bitterness of betrayal. He was betraying not his country. He was betraying his service, his duty, his brotherhood. And all for another, more ancient duty. He looked at the calendar smeared with toothpaste. 99 days. 99 steps to the court-martial. He smiled a joyless smile. For some, demobilization, and for him, a countdown. Target is 2 on the roof. Distance is 400. Crosswind, 3 meters per second. Gusty. The instructor's lifeless voice in the earpiece was as real as the slight vibration of the stock pressed against his shoulder. Sergey Belyaev, call sign Black, wasn't breathing. His world had narrowed to a glowing crosshairs in the eyepiece of the latest Shaheen thermal imaging site. On the roof of an abandoned 5-story building built on the training ground, 2 heat signatures were scuffling. Full-size targets equipped with motion sensors and shooting simulators. Electronics, soulless, but honest. It didn't forgive mistakes. His finger hovered over the trigger of the SV-98. He wasn't a sniper in the purest sense. He was a jack of all trades, like everyone in their group. But he loved working at long range. There was a kind of meditation in it, a cold calculation where there was no room for fuss or unnecessary movements. Pure mathematics of death. "Black, get to work," a voice commanded. Belyaev slowly exhaled half the air from his lungs and froze. A second, another. He waited for the gust of wind to subside. There it was, a smooth, almost imperceptible movement of his finger for the average person, a muffled, solid click of the rifle, drowned out by his headphones. In the scope, one of the signatures on the roof flickered and went out. "Target neutralized, transferring fire to the second," the instructor stated. Without taking his eye off the scope, Belyaev chambered another round. The bolt clacked briefly and menacingly. The second target began to shift, simulating a retreat to cover. Too slow. For Belyaev, it was like shooting at a stationary barrel. He led the target, caught his breath again. Another exhale, another click. The second signature vanished. "Clear. Group, change position. Grid 7-3. Time starts now." In one motion, he unclipped the rifle, slung it over his back, and crouching low, dashed towards the concrete blocks where Ivan Smirnov, his namesake by call sign, the other Black in their group, was already waiting for him. Smirnov, covering the sector with his short AK-12, nodded. "Like kids going to school, Belyaev." He grinned as Sergei landed beside him, rolling and immediately raising his assault rifle. "Shut up, Smirnov." Belyaev tossed back without malice, scanning the windows of the neighboring building through his red dot sight. "Get to work!" They were different. Belyaev was tall, wiry, with dark, almost black hair and a heavy gaze, which was how he got his call sign. He was the embodiment of Spetsnaz elitism. Silent, deadly, despising any sloppiness. Smirnov was a little shorter, broader in the shoulders, with a perpetual ironic smirk on his face. He was also black because of his hair color, and this created constant confusion for newcomers and a source of jokes among their own. Which Black, the angry one or the funny one, was how they usually clarified in their company. The training ended 3 hours later. Exhausted, covered in dust and sweat, they huddled by the Ural truck, surrendering their weapons and equipment. Captain Tarasenko, the commander of their group, walked among the fighters, offering brief remarks. "Belyaev, Smirnov, your 2-man team performed well, a solid 5. But on the exit from under the bridge, you bunched up too much. In a real situation, 1 AGS grenade launcher would have wiped you out. Think." "Yes, sir, Captain," they replied in unison. The barracks smelled of gun oil, sweat, and cooling metal. It was the smell of home. There were no stuffed animals or framed photos here. Instead, there were perfectly made bunks, pyramids of weapons, and standards charts. A world of simple and understandable rules. You either conform or you leave. There was no middle ground. Belyaev methodically cleaned his rifle. Every movement was perfected to the point of automatism. Cleaning rod, rags, alkaline solution, oil. He loved his weapon. It was more honest than people. It would never betray you if you took care of it. "Time is 2000 hours. Phone time. 30 minutes. The voice of the duty officer boomed through the barracks. The soldiers, some with joy, some with weary resignation, made their way to the lockers where their mobile phones were stored. Simple, button-operated, dumb phones, without cameras or internet access. all that was allowed by the regulations. Belyaev wasn't in a hurry. He finished with the rifle, put it back in the pyramid, locked it up. Only then did he take out his old Samsung. He went to the furthest corner of the armory, where no one would bother him. He dialed his mother's number. The ringing went on for a long time. Belyaev frowned. She usually answered right away. "Hello," a muffled, tearful voice answered the phone. "Mom, it's me. What happened?" His tone instantly hardened. All the relaxation after training evaporated. "Seryozhenka, son." His mother burst into sobs. "We're in trouble, Seryozha." "Mom, calm down. Tell me clearly. What kind of trouble? What's wrong with Lena? With Dad?" "Your father is fine. Lena, Arlenka, that bastard, her Vitya, her husband." She was gasping with tears. "He got into debt, huge debts. A cursed gambler. He's disappeared somewhere, and now people are coming to us." "Who's coming?" Belyaev asked in an icy tone. His fingers squeezed the phone so hard that the plastic creaked. "Scary people, Seryozha. They're demanding money. They say if we don't pay it back in 3 days, they'll do something to Lenka." She broke down, sobbing again. "They ambushed her near the entrance yesterday. They said it was the last warning. We're afraid to go to the police. They said it would be worse. What are we going to do, son?" Belyaev's world, so understandable and ordered, with its targets on roofs and standards, cracked and crumbled. He stood in the middle of the armory, surrounded by deadly iron, and felt absolutely helpless. There, 1,000 kilometers away, his sister was threatened by real, not training danger, and he couldn't do anything. "Mom, how much money?" 200,000. "Where are we going to get that kind of money, Seryozha? They said 3 days. Today is already the 2nd. "I understand. Listen to me," he forced himself to say, his voice even, with the commanding tone he used during drills. "Lock yourselves in. Don't open the door to anyone. I'll figure something out." "What will you figure out, son? You're in the army." "I will figure something out," he enunciated sharply. "That's all. I have to go. I'll call." He hung up. His hands trembled slightly. He looked at his palm, wide, calloused, capable of breaking a man's neck with a single move. And what good was it? He walked over to the wall, where a homemade countdown calendar hung. A regular sheet of drawing paper divided into 100 squares. Every evening, one of the senior soldiers crossed out another day. Today the number 87 was crossed out. 87 days. An eternity. Before, that number had seemed close and desirable. Now, it was a death sentence. 3 days. He didn't have 87 days. He returned to the barracks. The soldiers were chattering, discussing calls with their girlfriends, plans for civilian life. For them, the world remained the same. Ivan Smirnov, noticing his face, approached him. "What's wrong, Bailey? You look like you've drunk lead water? Girlfriend dump you 87 days before discharge? Classic." Belyaev looked at him in silence. Smirnov faltered. "Okay, I see you're not in the mood for jokes. What happened?" "Problems at home," Sergei replied dully. "Serious?" "More than." He didn't elaborate. "Not here. Not now." All evening he moved like an automaton. Dinner in the mess hall, evening roll call, watching the news on TV. He sat in the same row as everyone else, looked at the screen, but saw nothing. One thing hammered in his head. 3 days. He was running through the options. A request for leave due to family circumstances. Useless. By the time it was reviewed, by the time all the authorities signed off on it, weeks would pass. His captain, Tarasenko, was a decent guy, but the regulations were sacred to him. especially now, before the final inspection and possible deployment to Syria, where their group had been training for 6 months. No one would let go of a key soldier because of family troubles. After lights out, when the barracks plunged into darkness, filled with the measured breathing and snoring of dozens of healthy men, Belyaev lay with his eyes open, staring at the ceiling. Sleep wouldn't come. Thoughts, like annoying flies, swirled in his head. Police. My mother's scared, and rightly so. These bastards can make it worse. And while our valiant system gets its act together, there might be nothing left of Lenka. Money. 200,000. Where from? His contract salary, even with bonuses, didn't allow for such savings. Borrow from the guys? No one has that kind of money. There's only one thing left. The thought was cold and sharp, like a knife. AWOL. Unauthorized absence. For a regular conscript, the brig, a disciplinary battalion. For a contract soldier in an elite unit, and especially one with his status, it's a court-martial. The end of everything. Career, future, the respect of comrades, a shameful brand for life. He got up and tiptoed to the washroom. He splashed his face with ice-cold water. He looked at his reflection in the dim mirror. A hunted animal stared back at him. All his elite status, all his self-confidence, based on strength and skills, crumbled to dust in the face of simple, everyday trouble. What had he been taught? To kill, to survive, to follow orders. He hadn't been taught what to do when the enemy wasn't a bearded terrorist thousands of kilometers away, but a faceless monster threatening his sister in his hometown. He returned to his bunk. His brain, trained for tactical planning, had already begun to work in a new, forbidden direction. Perimeter. 3 rings. The first is the unit itself, a concrete fence with razor wire. The second is the external patrol of contract guard dogs. The third is cameras and motion sensors on the approaches. Daytime is not an option. Night. Between 2 and 4 in the morning is the changing of the guard and patrols. There's a dead zone behind the POL, petroleum, oil, and lubricants depot. The camera there is malfunctioning. They were supposed to fix it a month ago, but they shelved it. The patrol passes there once an hour at 20 minutes past the hour, so there's a window. Next, the forest belt, 2 kilometers to the highway. There, a passing car or a taxi to the nearest station. In the morning, they'll notice he's missing at roll call, around 7 o'clock. By that time, he should already be on the train. He lay back in bed. His heart was beating evenly, like a metronome. Fear was gone. Only cold calculation remained. The decision had been made. He would betray his duty, his unit, his comrades. He would break everything he had believed in for the past few years. But he couldn't betray his sister. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in many hours, it wasn't a tactical map of the training ground that appeared before his inner eye, but Lenka's face, laughing, with dimples in her cheeks. That's how he remembered it, and that's how it had to remain. The price didn't matter. The next day, he decided to make one last attempt. After breakfast, he approached Captain Tarasenko. "Comrade Captain, permission to speak." Tarasenko looked up from his papers, peering at him over his glasses. "Listening, Belyaev." "Comrade Captain, I have a family emergency. My sister is being threatened. I need to be home. I request a short-term leave of absence due to family circumstances." He spoke evenly, without emotion, as he should. Tarasenko took off his glasses, rubbed the bridge of his nose. "What threats? Who's threatening you?" "Her husband's debts. Criminal elements," Belyaev reported tersely. The captain sighed. "Belyaev, I sympathize with you, honestly, truly, but you understand this yourself. Less than 2 weeks until the final evaluation. You're in the core group. Your absence is a failure for the entire detachment. Threats are a police matter. Have your parents file a report. They're afraid, Comrade Captain. Fear is a poor advisor. Belyaev, I can't let you go. That's an order. If everyone ran home because of problems with their sister's hubby, we wouldn't have an army but a revolving door. Go, get to work, and get that nonsense out of your head. The police will handle it. That was it. A brick wall. Belyaev silently turned around. Yes, Comrade Captain. He left the headquarters. Smirnov was waiting for him outside. Well, did he let you go? He asked hopefully. Belyaev just shook his head. I thought so, Ivan sighed. The system, it doesn't give a damn about your sister. All it cares about is Private Belyaev, a unit on the roster. So what are you going to do, Black? Sergei gave him a long, heavy look. What I have to. Smirnov understood. You're out of your mind. They'll court-martial you. Belyaev, think this through. It's a stigma for life. Disciplinary battalion and then a black mark. No decent organization will take you. You'll be a security guard at a Pyotorochka store. Is it worth it? My sister is, Sergei snapped and walked toward the barracks. Smirnov watched him go. He knew that look, the look of a man who had already made up his mind. And it was terrifying. He'd seen that look on guys before a raid, a one-way ticket look. Door, go! A short, precise kick of the boot. The lock snapped like a rotten nut. Sergei Belyaev, Black, was the first to burst into the dim room. His body was working on autopilot, on reflexes hammered into his muscles through thousands of repetitions. The barrel of the Vityaz submachine gun swept in a short fan, scanning the corners. Left, clear. Right, target. 2 short clicks, almost merged into one, of training shots. 2 red laser dots froze on the cardboard silhouette in the heart area. Clear! His own voice sounded muffled, as if from underwater. Ivan Smirnov, his namesake nicknamed Black, was already working behind him. That's what they were called in the group, the Blacks. 2 peas in a pod, both having passed the same selection, both from the same training unit, both equally grim and effective. Ivan moved like a shadow, covering the sector that Sergei had just left behind. The rest of the group poured into the room. "Check your corners!" roared the instructor, a captain with chevrons faded from sweat and sun. He pointed to a corner that Sergei had passed a split second faster than he should have. Belyaev, what if there had been a tripwire there at ankle level, or a petal mine? You think your boots are made of adamantium? 100 days until you're out and you're already slacking off? Sergei silently nodded, accepting the reprimand. He wasn't slacking off. On the contrary, he was strung tighter than a wire, but all his thought processes, all his vaunted concentration as a Special Forces soldier were not here now, not in this plywood kill house at the training ground. They were 1,000 kilometers away, in the gray 5-story building in his hometown, where his mother... He shook his head, banishing the image. Not now. Now is work. My fault, Comrade Captain. The instructor narrowed his eyes. He had known Belyaev for months. He knew him as a machine, as a perfect performer who never screwed up on such basic things. What's wrong with you, Black? You've been walking around for 2 days like you crapped your pants. Senioritis? I'll cure that for you real quick. 5 laps around the training ground in full gear. Move it! Sergei turned around without a word. Not a trace of resentment or outrage on his face. An order is an order. He was already slinging the submachine gun over his back when Ivan Smirnov stepped forward. Comrade Captain, permission to join him? It'll be faster with 2. The captain shifted his gaze from one black to the other. 2 equally inscrutable faces. 2 soldiers connected by something more than just service. Smirnov, I didn't send you a personal invitation. If you want to keep him company, that's your business. I want both of you back here in 20 minutes. And Belyaev, after you finish, go see Major Popov. He's been asking about you. Sergei's heart skipped a beat. Major Vladimir Popov, the commander of their detachment, the man who decided everything. If he was asking about him, then the late-night call hadn't gone unnoticed. The special services worked efficiently. "Yes, sir," he snapped and bolted for the exit. Dust under his boots, rhythmic breathing, the weight of the body armor and weapon, which had become a familiar part of his own body. Even ran alongside, not falling behind by a single step. They didn't talk. They didn't need words. For 20 minutes they silently circled the perimeter, fenced with barbed wire, past the watchtowers, past the shooting range, where another group was practicing double taps. In Sergei's head, a metronome ticked, counting not minutes, but the days remaining until demobilization. 96. 96 days until freedom. And the abyss that had opened up yesterday. Mom's in the hospital, Seryozha. Stroke. The doctors say. They say, we need to be prepared. His sister's voice on the phone, breaking, full of tears and despair. He's here, playing war thousands of miles away, defending something abstract while the most real and important thing in his life is crumbling. He knows. Ivan finally squeezed out when they, sweaty and angry, slowed down near the entrance to the training building. I know, Sergei replied curtly. Going to Popov? I am. Think he'll let you go? Sergei was silent. He wasn't thinking. He knew. But it was worth a try. It was the only right official way. The path that should have worked for an elite fighter, the best in his draft. He wasn't just some green recruit from the construction battalion who could be shut up with extra duty. He was Sergei Belyaev, black, a fighter whose training cost the state more money than the annual budget of a small town. Major Popov's office was austere. A desk, 2 chairs, a map of Syria covering the entire wall, studded with flags. The major himself, a short, wiry man with piercing eyes, sat at the desk, studying some folder. He didn't offer a seat. Comrade Major, Private Belyaev, reporting as ordered. Popov raised his eyes. His gaze was heavy, scrutinizing. Belyaev, I've been informed that you used a personal communication device last night. You know that's forbidden, especially before exercises. I'm at fault, Comrade Major. There was an urgent necessity. Urgent necessity is when a group is surrounded and needs artillery support, Belyaev, not when a soldier's cat is giving birth at home. Tell me what happened. Sergei straightened up. His voice was even, without emotion, like during a report after an operation. My mother is dying. Stroke. Requesting short-term leave due to family circumstances. For 10 days. Major Popov put down the folder. He folded his hands on the desk and looked at Sergei as if he was seeing him for the first time. Belyaev, how many people are in our detachment? 42, Comrade Major. And how many of them are currently on assignment in the sandbox? 12. Correct. And how many are preparing to be sent in a month? Sergei was silent. He knew the answer. His group. All of them. Your group, Belyaev. And you are the number 1 in the assault pair. You are not a person. You are a function. You are a tool. A very expensive and very effective tool. I can let Private Petrov from the repair company go home because his grandmother is sick. Because Petrov can be replaced by another Petrov and no one will notice the difference. But who will I replace you with? Smirnov? And who will I replace Smirnov with then? You're throwing off my entire combat coordination. Each of the major's words was like a punch to the gut. Logical, correct, devastating. Sergei felt a cold rage boiling inside. He wasn't a tool. He was his mother's son. Comrade Major, it's not a grandmother who's sick. It's my mother. She might die. Everyone has mothers, Belyaev. Popov's voice became harsher. I have one too, and when I was your age and serving, she was also sick, and I didn't run to the commander in tears. I served, because there's a word duty. You took an oath. You knew where you were going. This is special forces, not a finishing school. You have less than 100 days left. Finish your service. Come back a hero. Your mother will be proud of you. Dead? Flashed through Sergei's mind. I understand everything, Comrade Major.
But the situation is critical. The situation will be critical for us in a month near Aleppo if I start sending you home now. Popov slammed his hand on the table. Belyaev, I value you as a fighter. You are one of the best I've ever had. That's why I'm going to pretend this conversation never happened, and your night call never happened. But if you come to me again with this topic, or I notice that you're looking for roundabout ways, you know what a diesel is? And a military tribunal? Do you want to turn your 100 days into 3 years? So that your mother won't meet you on demobilization, but will be bringing you packages to the disciplinary battalion? If she can, of course. The last words were intentionally cruel, a finishing shot, to break him, to podchinit, to return the tool to working condition. The matter is closed, Belyaev. Go. Prepare for night shooting. Sergei turned around. About face. A sharp click of heels on the floor. A step. Another step.
He left the office and closed the door behind him. In the hallway, he leaned his back against the cold wall. His breathing was ragged. He wasn't in a rage. He wasn't in despair. Inside was only an icy, ringing emptiness and a decision. He didn't go to the barracks. He went down to the basement, to the armory, where they cleaned and prepared weapons. There, in the corner, behind a pile of old mats, was their stash. Ivan Smirnov and Maxim Tarasenko, their medic nicknamed Doc, were already there. Seeing Sergei's face, they understood everything without words. Well? Ivan asked quietly. Sergei shook his head. Tool, he said hollowly. Function. Maxim Tarasenko, a tall, awkward guy who studied medicine in civilian life and was taken into the squad for his unique memory and nerves of steel, handed Sergei a flask. Here, take a swig. Water. Sergei took several large gulps. He threatened me with a tribunal, he continued, staring at the wall. Said if I even twitched, then my demobilization would be screwed, and Syria too. Bastard, Ivan breathed out shortly. Staff rat. Has he ever even poked his nose outside that training ground? Vanya, easy. Doc stopped him. The major's right in his own way. From his perspective, to him we're just units on the roster. Combat units. And a mother isn't a combat unit? Ivan exploded. Seryoga, what are you going to do? Sergei looked at his friend. His gaze was heavy, mature. That same look that appeared on his face before an assault, the look of a man who has made a decision and calculated all the risks. I'm going, he said simply. Silence hung in the basement. All that could be heard was a patrol passing in the corridor upstairs. Unauthorized absence, Doc asked, using army slang for unauthorized leave. UA. Seryoga, are you out of your mind? 3 months and change until discharge, the home stretch. They'll notice you're gone in an hour. Popov will personally turn everything upside down. He won't forgive this. This isn't just AWOL, it's a special forces soldier deserting. It's a charge. Real jail time. I'll be back, Sergei replied just as calmly. I need 2 days, there and back, just to see her, for her to see me. And if you don't make it back in time, Ivan persisted. If a patrol picks you up at the train station, then I won't make it. Sergei cut him off. Then it'll be a court-martial, but at least I'll have tried. I can't sit here cleaning my rifle knowing she's there alone. My sister can't handle it all, and I can't be an instrument when it comes to my mother. I'm not him. He looked at his hands. Hands that could kill, save, assemble, and disassemble any weapon blindfolded. Now these hands seemed useless to him. "I need your help," he said, looking up at his friends. Ivan Smirnov and Maxim Tarasenko exchanged glances. This was the moment they had gone through hell and high water and training together for. Brotherhood. It was more important than regulations, more important than Major Popov's orders and the fear of a court-martial. "What do you need?" Ivan asked without hesitation. "Money. Cash. Everything you've got. For a ticket and travel. And civilian clothes. Something inconspicuous. And an alibi," Doc added. "Night firing practice. They won't notice you're gone until morning. We'll say you felt sick after the cross-country run and you're resting in the medical bay. I'll work it out with the medic. He owes me one." "I have civilian clothes," Ivan said. "Jeans and a hoodie. In the equipment room behind the RPG crates. I'll bring them. Money. We can scrape together 3,000. Will that be enough for a reserve seat?" "It'll be enough," Sergei nodded. The plan was ridiculously simple and ridiculously risky, but there was no other way. The official channels were closed. All that remained was the path of a soldier who puts his duty to his family above his duty to a soulless military machine. "Tonight," Sergei said, "after lights out, through the far corner of the perimeter where the camera's on the fritz, I'll go." He didn't say it like a guilty conscript going AWOL for a bottle of vodka. He said it like a squad leader giving a combat order. And his two most loyal soldiers accepted that order for execution. Because 100 days until discharge is an eternity when your mother is dying at home. And no Syria, no awards and no honor of the uniform are worth staring at that eternity from the barracks window. 78 flashed through Sergei Belyayev's head as the rattling train lurched on a rail joint. Not until discharge, until the court-martial. He sat huddled in the corner by the window, watching the gray villages flash by, the dirty, thawing snow along the tracks. A demobilization train. Only it was going in the wrong direction. Not from the unit to home, but from home even further into the unknown, saving what was left of his old life. He was wearing a worn civilian jacket bought for 3,000 rubles from some shady character at the train station, and jeans that felt baggy and uncomfortable after his familiar uniform. Under the jacket was an army undershirt, the only tribute to the past he had burned 2 nights ago, jumping over the concrete fence with barbed wire. He moved like a professional, silently, precisely, using the shadow of the guard tower and the minute-long glitch in the camera that only he and a couple of people from his squad knew about. He had made the escape plan in 5 minutes, while Lieutenant Popov in the equipment room was explaining to him for the 100th time that a soldier's personal problems are his personal problems, not a reason for a leave request. "Young man, your ticket?" The female conductor, with a tired face and drawn-on eyebrows, looked at him suspiciously. Sergei silently handed over his ticket. His hand didn't tremble. Pulse. 72 beats per minute. He measured it mentally, out of habit. At the training ground, after a forced march in full gear, they had taught him to control his breathing and heartbeat in order to make an accurate shot. Now, this skill helped him not to give himself away. "Student?" she asked, scrutinizing his short haircut. "Uh-huh," he grunted, not taking his eyes off the window. "And why so gloomy? Failed your exams?" "Failed," Sergei replied just as curtly. His whole life was now one failed exam. The conductor shrugged and went on, and he was left alone with his reflection in the dirty glass, a close-cropped guy with a hard, prematurely adult gaze. Black. That's what they called him in the unit. Not because of his hair color, but because of his gaze and the way he worked. Quietly, cleanly, without unnecessary movements or emotions. There was another Black, Ivan Smirnov, a long-serving contract soldier, almost an old-timer by contract standards. A perpetual sergeant who had found his home in the army and sought nothing more. Ivan was also a professional, but a different kind. He was part of the system, a cog in it, perfectly fitted and lubricated. But Sergei always felt like a foreign body, too sharp, too independent. He came here for strength, for a test, for an elite brotherhood, not to become a lifetime fixture of a military unit. Smirnov would be reporting to the special department right now, drafting my performance review, Belyaev thought with a wry smirk. Prone to adventurism, withdrawn, enjoyed authority among comrades, but remained aloof. He would never understand. For him, the oath is everything. But what's an oath worth when your 15-year-old sister writes to you in a panic? Seryozha, Mom hasn't gotten out of bed for 2 days. The ambulance won't come, says it's not their case, and stepfather has disappeared somewhere with the money. He clenched his fists so hard his knuckles turned white. 2 days. For 2 days he had tried to resolve everything by the book. A report to the company commander. Refusal. A conversation with the political officer. Empty words about duty and patience. A phone call to the hospital in his hometown. He was treated rudely and hung up on. The system he had sworn to protect had turned out to be a deaf, cumbersome, and indifferent wall. And then he decided to act himself, as he had been taught. Assess the situation, define the goal, find the shortest path, eliminate obstacles. The obstacle was the army. The train slowed down, creeping towards a big city. Transfer. Sergei stood up, slung the meager backpack over his shoulder, containing only a change of t-shirt, water, and the knife he had managed to smuggle out of the unit. Not a standard issue one, but his own, civilian, but no less dangerous for it. He moved through the carriage against the flow of the crowd exiting onto the platform. He didn't push, but slipped through, like water through stones. His body, trained to navigate the labyrinths of kill houses and crawl on his belly under barbed wire, instinctively found empty spaces. The train station hummed like a disturbed beehive. Police patrols, sleepy passengers, loud taxi drivers. For an ordinary person, chaos. For Sergei, a map with marked threats and shelters. He saw everything. How a police lieutenant lazily scanned the crowd. How 2 guys in civilian clothes, holding their backs too straight, stood by the ticket windows, possibly a military patrol in plain clothes. He skirted them widely, pretending to study the timetable on the board. His brain was working in combat mission mode. Objective: get to the bus station. Route: through the underpass, then along Lenin Street, turn onto Promyshlenaya. Possible threats: patrol units, military police. Neutralization method: don't attract attention, move confidently in case of contact. The cover story: part-time student. He bought shawarma at a stall. After army pearl barley and stew, this fatty, spicy food seemed like a delicacy. He ate quickly, standing in the shade of some pavilion, constantly observing. A group of guys in camouflage walked past, obviously newbies or short-timers on leave. They walked swaggeringly, laughed loudly, gawked at the girls. Greenhorns. He looked at them from the height of his special forces experience, as if at another biological species. They served for a year, and he served for a year. But they counted the days until their discharge orders, drew demobilization albums, and dreamed of getting drunk in civilian life. And he learned to kill, survive in the forest with only a knife, and sleep 3 hours a day for weeks. Different armies, different universes, and now he, an elite fighter, was hiding from guys like these, who in his presence in the unit were afraid to breathe loudly. The irony was so bitter that the shawarma got stuck in his throat, It was easier at the bus station. The public here was even more diverse and motley. 40 minutes remained until his bus. He found a place in the farthest corner of the waiting room, from where all the entrances were visible. He sat down, put his backpack on his lap, and pretended to be asleep. But he wasn't sleeping. He was listening. Through the hum of voices, the announcer's announcements, and the noise of the television, he distinguished individual sounds: the click of a lighter, the creak of a door, 2 heavy footsteps on the tile. A cheap button-operated phone, bought along with the jacket, vibrated in his pocket. An unknown number. His heart stopped for a moment, then beat with redoubled force. He couldn't answer. The phone was a beacon. He dropped the call. A minute later, an SMS came, short, from his combat comrade, Maxim Tarasenko, nicknamed Doc, the only one he had hinted at his plans to. "Black, they're looking for you. The special department has raised everyone. Said you left with a weapon. Lying bastards. Be careful. If they catch you, disciplinary battalion at best." Sergei gritted his teeth. With a weapon, of course. It was easier to issue a wanted notice that way, easier to justify harsh measures, easier to turn him not into a son who rushed to save his mother, but into a dangerous criminal. So now he was being hunted not only by military patrols, but also by the police. The stakes had risen. Disciplinary battalion. He pictured that bleak hole where they break people like him. No. A court-martial and a real sentence were preferable to this humiliation. He deleted the message and turned off his phone. No more contact. Now he was alone. Completely alone. The Brotherhood of Special Forces, which they talked about so much in political education classes, remained there, beyond the fence. Here, on a dirty chair in the waiting room of a provincial bus station, there was no brotherhood. There was only one goal: the apartment on the 5th floor of the old prefabricated building. The bus was an old Icarus, which smelled of diesel fuel and hopelessness. Sergei took a seat in the back. An elderly woman with a checkered bag settled in next to him. She fussed for a long time, arranging her belongings, and finally, with a sigh, turned to him. "Heading to our town, son?" Sergei nodded. "Studying, I suppose? Or visiting family?" "To my mother," he replied, and that simple word echoed with pain somewhere under his ribs. "That's a good thing," the old woman nodded approvingly. "A mother is one of a kind. Mine also served. A long time ago, though. He came back a different person, became silent, kept everything to himself. The army, it changes you." Sergei turned to the window. "Changes you, more than anything. It stripped away all the shell, all the youthful foolishness, leaving only a steel rod inside. It taught him to endure pain, cold, and fear. Taught him to appreciate simple things: hot food, dry socks, 5 hours of uninterrupted sleep. But it also showed him that this whole system, all this power and discipline, was powerless in the face of simple human misfortune. The state he had sworn allegiance to turned out to be an abstraction, and his mother, lying helpless in an empty apartment, was a reality, and he made his choice. He spent the last kilometers in a kind of stupor. Familiar landscapes from childhood floated past, but evoked no emotions. Here was the fork in the road where he and the boys used to build bonfires. Here was the river where he had his first kiss. It all seemed like it was from another life, seen in a movie. His reality now was Article 337 of the Criminal Code of the Russian Federation, unauthorized abandonment of a unit. From 2 to 5 years, if he was lucky. The bus entered his hometown. Evening lights, bustling pedestrians hurrying home. Home. He got off at his stop and shivered. Not from the cold, but from a strange feeling. He was a stranger here.
a ghost in camouflage under a civilian jacket. He didn't go along the main street. His route lay through garages, wastelands, and dark courtyards. He moved quickly and quietly, hugging the walls, using the shadows. Instincts, honed to automaticity during night exercises to capture a prisoner, worked flawlessly. He froze several times, letting teenagers with beer or random passers-by with dogs pass by. No one noticed him. Here was his house, a 9-story prefabricated building, bleak and gray. He entered the neighboring entrance and went up to the top floor, to the attic window that overlooked the courtyard. From here he could see his balcony and the windows of their apartment on the 5th floor. The light was only on in one room, in his mother's. Sergei took a small monocular out of his backpack, another trophy that he had managed to privatize. Cheap Chinese optics, but enough for his purposes. He focused it on the window. Some kind of shadow was moving behind the tulle curtain. Vague, blurry. He couldn't make out who it was. Mother? Sister? Or someone else? He sat on the cold concrete floor of the attic for almost an hour, watching. Everything inside him constricted into an icy lump. The fear that he had almost forgotten how to experience returned. It wasn't fear for his own life. He was ready for that. It was fear for them, fear of being too late. Finally, he made up his mind. He went downstairs, left the entrance, and, going around the house, entered his own. The elevator wasn't working, as always. He started climbing the stairs. Each flight was like a stage on an obstacle course. His steps were silent. He didn't touch the railing. He remembered which step on the 3rd floor creaked. He stepped over it. 5th floor. Familiar smell. A mixture of old cabbage soup, dust, and something else. Medicinal. The door to their apartment, upholstered in brown leatherette. He froze in front of it, listening. Silence. He raised his hand to press the bell, but his finger froze an inch from the button. No. Ringing was out of the question. If strangers were there, it would scare them away or, on the contrary, give them time to prepare. He took a thin metal plate out of his pocket, part of an old ruler, sharpened on one edge. The ability to pick simple locks was part of basic training. In case you need to enter a premises quietly, the instructor had said. His heart was pounding in his throat. Pulse, 120 no less. His breathing was uneven. He took a deep breath, exhaled, again, like before a parachute jump. The lock clicked surprisingly easily. He slowly, millimeter by millimeter, opened the door. Dark corridor. A strip of light was coming from the room on the left. He stepped inside, closed the door behind him, preventing it from clicking, and froze, turning into listening. And in that deafening silence of his own apartment, he heard quiet, stifled sobs, his sister's sobs. 77 flashed through his head. 77 days until a new life, or until its end. He took a step toward the room. His AWOL was just beginning. Sergei Belyaev, call sign Black, was tightening the last screw on the system unit cover. The screw went in hard, with a nasty squeak, as if resisting his plan. The tactical training classroom was empty. Only the coolers of a dozen powerful computers hummed, their monitors displaying 3-dimensional terrain maps with superimposed tactical symbols. Operation Desert Shield, which they had been practicing for the past 3 weeks, looked almost like a game here on the screen. Red rhombuses for the enemy, blue rectangles for friendly forces. Just click, and the squad will go around. Click, and a drone will show you a picture from above. Click, and you'll be home, flashed through Belyaev's mind. He leaned a hand on the table, feeling his fingers tremble. Strength, endurance, elitism, all of it crumbled to dust before a single, short call from his sister 2 days ago.
Mom's really bad, Seryoja. The doctors, they're not promising anything. He jerked his head, banishing the image of the hospital ward. Now was not the time for weakness. Now was the time for a plan. His plan. The plan was simple and insane, like a parachute jump in a thunderstorm, and that's exactly why it might work. The door creaked. Belyaev didn't turn around. He already knew who it was by the footsteps. A heavy, slightly shuffling gait. Viktor Petrov, their unit medic, callsign Doc. The only person in the company Belyaev could trust not only with his back in battle, but also with what was eating him up inside right now. Tinkering with the hardware again, Black? Doc's voice was calm, with a slight rasp. You should be a tech, not an assault trooper. Major Muratov's looking for you. Says it's about data adjustments for the drones. Belyaev silently pushed the system unit back into place. Muratov can wait. He doesn't like to wait. Petrov came closer, surveying the empty classroom. You're not yourself. Since that call. What happened? And don't give me that everything's fine bullshit. I can tell your pulse by ear after a 5-kilometer forced march. Right now, it's like you've been lying in ambush for 3 hours. Sergei slowly turned. His face, usually as impenetrable as a helmet visor, now resembled earth cracked by drought. I need to leave, Vit. Petrov froze. He had expected anything. A story about debts, problems with a girlfriend, but not this. Leave, in their world, meant only one thing. Unauthorized absence from the unit. AWOL. A crime. Are you out of your mind? Doc breathed in a whisper. 67 days until the order. Until discharge. What, are you throwing your entire service down the drain? A court-martial, Sari. You're not some fresh-faced recruit who ran off to see his mom for pies. You're Belyaev, the best in the group. Doc's words hit hard, but Sergei didn't even flinch. He looked his friend in the eye, and there was such desperate determination in his gaze that Petrov felt uneasy. My mother's dying, Belyaev said evenly, without emotion. The doctor said, a few days, maybe a week. I went to see Muratov. And? I sympathize, soldier, but we have training for the deployment. Exercises on the horizon. You're a key figure. State tasks. Your mother is a strong woman. She'll understand. Hang in there. Belyaev mimicked Major Vladimir Muratov's even, soulless tone with frightening accuracy. There was so much bureaucratic indifference in that hang in there that Doc involuntarily clenched his fists. He knew Muratov. Tough, by the book, for whom the unit was a machine and the people were its parts. And if one part starts to malfunction due to personal problems, it's either fixed or discarded. A leave of absence for family reasons in the midst of preparations for Syria for a key specialist in the group is a fantasy. Son of a bitch, Petrov hissed. But Sari, that's a fuck-up. Cast iron. The counterintelligence guys will tear you apart. All your elite training, all your special forces, they'll use it against you. Knew what he was getting into. Trained. Aware of the consequences. They'll give you such a sentence that your great-grandchildren will be celebrating your discharge. That's why I need your help, Belyaev said just as quietly. Petrov recoiled as if struck. You're asking me to become an accomplice? Me? Sari, my contract expires in a year. I have a wife, a mortgage. I can't. You can, Belyaev interrupted. His voice became firmer, with the steel that Muratov valued so much in him. Today, at 2200 hours, I need to be outside the perimeter. I need civilian clothes, money, and to have my bunk kept warm until morning roll call. Doc sat down on a chair, clutching his head in his hands. This wasn't the Black he knew. Not that laconic, self-assured professional who could single-handedly take out a group of simulated enemies during exercises and return with an impassive face. Now, a man cornered was sitting in front of him.
And the worst thing was, he was using his professional skills not to carry out an order, but to violate it. "Civilian clothes," Petrov muttered. "I have some. Jeans, a sweatshirt, in the quartermaster's, in my hidey hole. I was planning on going to the brig, if anything. I was thinking of sneaking off for a couple of days after Syria, while they process the paperwork. Money. How much? Everything you have. I'll pay it back, with my first paycheck on the civilian side." "If you'll even have that paycheck." Doc chuckled bitterly. He raised his head. "How are you going to get out? There are cameras everywhere. Patrols. The perimeter is electrified and rigged with motion sensors. This isn't some backwater motor rifle regiment fence where conscripts sneak out for vodka." Belyaev smirked. The first time in the last 2 days, it was a grim, predatory smirk. "I spent 2 months installing those cameras, with engineers from Moscow. I know the blind spots.
I know the schedule for changing the codes on the electronic locks. I know where the sensor's sensitivity drops during the night chill. I am their security system, and I'm also their biggest vulnerability." Petrov stared at him, wide-eyed. He'd always known Black was the best, but he hadn't imagined just how good. Belyaev didn't just serve. He absorbed everything, analyzed it, memorized it. Not because he was ordered to, but because it was his nature. The nature of a wolf, studying the cage not to sit in it, but to know how to get out. "What about the bed?" Doc asked, already realizing he was in too deep. That he couldn't refuse. The brotherhood they talked about so much in political education classes turned out not to be empty words. It was here, in this empty classroom, smelling of ozone and dust. It was forcing him to risk everything for a friend. "At 9:30 p.m., you go to the infirmary. Do you have any of the young guys with chronic gastritis?" Igor Popov, a spirit, always pale as death, grabs his stomach at the slightest thing. Perfect. At 9:30 p.m., Popov has a severe attack. You drag him to the medic's office. Commotion, shouting, stretchers. You distract the duty officer. While everyone's watching your show, I leave. You return to the barracks after lights out. Take a couple of warm sets of fatigues from the dryer, roll them up, and stuff them under my blanket. Create the shape of a body. If the officer on duty comes in at night, he won't see anything with a flashlight. We'll make it to morning. And in the morning, Petrov finished for him, Major Muratov will personally lead the search party, and the first thing he'll do is come to me, because I'm your friend." Belyaev nodded. "Tell him I was talking about Syria, that I was on edge, worried, that I'm a lone wolf, and you were even a little afraid of me. Muratov will like that. He likes his soldiers to be psychos, as long as they're controllable. He'll decide I'm blowing off steam somewhere in the woods. That'll buy me another 12 hours. They fell silent. The computers hummed. On one of the screens, a red rhombus flashed. The simulated enemy had made a maneuver. The game continued. "You know what's the worst part, Gray?" Doc said quietly. "This morning at roll call, I saw the other Black, Smirnov. Ivan Smirnov, a soldier from the parallel group, who'd received the same call sign because of his coal-black hair and swarthy skin, just like Belyaev. It was a constant source of jokes. "Black, report to the major." "Which one?" "So what?" Belyaev didn't understand. The thing is, he was standing in formation like a ramrod. Taut, angry, ready to go to hell right now. A proper soldier. And I thought, that's what a special forces soldier should be like. And you're breaking all that. For what?
To get to hold my mother's hand, Belyaev answered hoarsely, turning to the window. So she doesn't go alone.
Wouldn't you break it? Petrov said nothing. He simply stood up and walked towards the exit. The quartermasters. In an hour. The jeans will be under the old mattresses. I'll stuff the money in your pocket. And Gray, Belyaev turned around. Don't get caught. Because if they catch you, I'll say you stole everything. And you know what? You'll confirm my story. Got it? Sergei nodded briefly. He understood. Doc was giving him more than just clothes and money. He was giving him a cover story, saving his own skin. And that was fair. In their world, everyone survived as they could. At 9:29 p.m., the barracks was living its usual pre-lights-out evening life. Someone was sewing on a fresh collar. Someone was polishing their boots, turning them into black mirrors. The smell of shoe polish, sweat and soap, the eternal smell of the barracks. Belyaev, already in clean fatigues, was sitting on his bed, methodically, centimeter by centimeter, wiping his rifle with a rag. His personal AK-103. He knew every scratch on it, every rivet. The weapon was an extension of his hands. Now he was saying goodbye to it. Suddenly, a muffled groan came from the far end of the barracks, followed by Doc's loud shout. "Duty officer! Soldiers sick! Stretcher, quickly!" Chaos erupted. Several people jumped up to Popov's bed, who was dramatically bent double. Doc was commanding loudly, professionally, creating the necessary level of panic. The company duty officer, a young contract sergeant, scurried around, calling the duty officer for the unit on the radio. At that moment, Belyaev stood up. No one paid any attention to him. All eyes were glued to the show that Petrov was putting on. Sergei slipped into the dryer room. In a flash, he was already changing into the stiff, unfamiliar jeans and sweatshirt. He carefully folded his fatigues and stuffed them into a far corner. He felt the wad of crumpled bills in his pocket. The exit from the dryer room led to a dark corridor, ending at the back door of the barracks. The lock was electronic. The code changed every 12 hours. Belyaev entered the 6-digit combination he'd glimpsed yesterday afternoon over the signalman's shoulder. 271828. Euler's number. The signalman was a smart guy. A green light flashed. The lock clicked softly. He found himself on the street. The cold night air hit him in the face. Ahead, about 300 meters away, was the main perimeter. 2 rows of barbed wire, razor wire between them, motion sensors, and cameras on poles. Suicide. But Belyaev didn't go that way. He dove into the shadow of the building and, crouching low, ran along the wall towards the motor pool. He moved silently, like a ghost. Years of training had transformed his body into a perfect instrument. Every step calculated, every movement economical. He wasn't running. He was flowing in the darkness. There was the corner of the motor pool. Beyond lay open space, about 50 meters to the next shelter. The fuel depot. He froze, blending into the shadows. In the distance, he heard the footsteps of a patrol. 2 men. They were walking slowly, shining flashlights around. Belyaev didn't even breathe. He became part of the wall, a dark spot. The patrolmen passed by, lazily chatting about football. He let them get 100 meters away, and then he bolted. Not in a straight line, zigzagging from one camera blind spot to another. His brain worked like the onboard computer of a fighter jet, calculating trajectory, time, risks. There he was, frozen behind a stack of boxes. A dash to the tank. He lay still. He saw a camera lens looking the other way. He had 12 seconds. One last sprint to the far corner of the fence, where it bordered the boiler room's service area. Here, he knew, the engineers had cut corners. There was only one motion sensor, an old model, and its beam was aimed at a height of 1.5 meters. And below it, right at ground level, was a dead zone of 40 centimeters. And it was here, under a layer of sod that he himself had brought here a month ago for landscaping, that he had hidden a coil of cutting tools. He lay down on the cold, damp ground. He smelled fuel oil and decaying leaves. His hands quickly cleared the earth. There it was, bolt cutters, not ordinary ones, but hydraulic, borrowed from the rescue workers. He crawled to the chain-link fence. Snip, another snip. He wasn't cutting a hole. He was severing the fence's attachments to the lower cable. He worked quickly, precisely, like a surgeon. In 3 minutes, the passage was ready. He carefully bent back the fence, creating a narrow slit at ground level. He squeezed through, feeling the cold metal scrape his back. And there he was, outside. He lay in the ditch on the other side of the fence, breathing heavily. Free, and at the same time, never had he been in such a trap. He stood up, brushed the dirt off his clothes. Ahead, the forest loomed black, and beyond it, a few kilometers away, the lights of the highway glowed. 67 days until his discharge, 67 days that he had traded for a few hours with his mother. He looked back at the lights of the base. His life, his service, his honor remained there. His friend, who was now lying to the duty officer to save him, remained there. He clenched his fists. "Hang on, Mom. I'm coming." And Sergei Belyaev, a Special Forces soldier, the best in his group, and now a deserter, dissolved into the night forest. "One ticket to Uzlovaya." His voice sounded alien, muffled. Sergei Belyaev, known as Black to his own men, shoved crumpled bills into the ticket window. Money he'd managed to withdraw from his card before it turned into a useless piece of plastic. The cashier, a woman of indeterminate age with a tired face, gave his short haircut, straight back, and the cheap civilian jacket he'd bought at the first market a penetrating look, a look that he had learned to read over the years of service. There was no suspicion in it, only indifferent curiosity. But for Black, that was enough to make everything inside clench into an icy knot. He was a runaway, a fugitive, a deserter. The word hammered in his head, drowning out the clatter of the train wheels as it pulled away. Every person in this open-berth carriage, smelling of boiled eggs, damp linens, and stale fumes of alcohol, was a potential threat. The old woman across from him, knitting an endless scarf. The 2 shift workers who had already opened a bottle of vodka. The young mother with a whimpering child. All of them were civilians. Peaceful. Those he had sworn to protect. Now they were the scenery in his personal hell, and he was a wolf in sheep's clothing, trying not to give himself away with a single movement. His body, honed by thousands of hours of training, was a traitor. It didn't know how to slouch. It didn't know how to sprawl out on the bunk in a relaxed manner. His shoulders instinctively kept his back straight. His chin tended to tilt upward. His gaze automatically scanned the space, noting exits, potentially aggressive subjects, escape routes. He was a GRU Spetsnaz soldier, elite, a one-off. He had been taught to survive in the desert and in the mountains, to operate behind enemy lines, to speak foreign languages, to kill with his bare hands. But no one had taught him how to become invisible in an open-berth carriage on the Moscow-Voronezh train. It turned out to be harder than clearing a building of terrorists. There, everything was clear. There was the enemy. There was the task. There was a brother's shoulder beside you. But here the enemy was anyone who could call 102. The enemy was the military patrol at the next station. The enemy was himself, his own bearing, his habits, his past. 37 days remained until his demobilization. 37. He remembered 2 months ago, when the cherished number 100 appeared on the calendar in the orderly room. He and Ivan Smirnov, the second Black, his namesake by call sign and brother in spirit, were sitting in the smoking room. Well, Bailey, 100. Ivan grinned then, clapping him on the shoulder. Soon we'll be civilians, freedom, girls. We'll forget this Syria like a bad dream. Sergei only nodded silently then, exhaling smoke. He wasn't looking forward to civilian life with the same puppy-like enthusiasm as the others. The army had become his home, a comprehensible, structured, honest world where everything was decided by strength, skill, and endurance, where there was brotherhood, cemented by sweat and gunpowder. He despised the duhi, new recruits, who whined and counted the days from the first hour of service. He, Black, was different. He was a professional. And now this professional, who had passed a selection process that broke 9 out of 10 candidates, was sitting, pressed against the bunk, and afraid of his compartment neighbor. What irony. The neighbor, a guy about 20 years old in a brand-new demobilization uniform of the airborne forces with aiguillettes and badges that he could never have had, noticed his tension. "Hey, countryman, you going home too?" He moved closer, reeking of cheap beer. "I'm Yegor Popov. I served a year in Tula." "Where are you from?" "I can tell by your haircut. You're one of us." Sergei shook his head. "Speak less. Listen more. Your biography is a state secret." Their instructor, Colonel Tarasenko, had hammered into their heads. "From far away," he squeezed out. "Ah, I understand. Secrecy." Yegor Popov wouldn't let up. "We had guys like that too, rocket men and all that. Silent as the grave. But me? I'm airborne. We have nothing to hide." He proudly puffed out his chest, which sported a parachutist excellent badge, most likely bought at the nearest military surplus store. Black inwardly grimaced. A poser. He'd seen hundreds like that. He carried boxes in a warehouse for a year, and now he's pretending to be Rambo. In their unit, they'd have wrapped those aiguillettes around his ears, but now this talkative Died, senior conscript, was his cover. 2 soldiers are going home, a picture-perfect scenario, fewer suspicions. "Tired," Sergei said curtly, turning to the window. "Oh, I understand that." Yegor nodded. "The last 100 days are the longest. First you wait, then the days fly by, and the last week is like a year. In our company, one Duke kept a calendar, and the Dedi almost shoved that calendar up his ass, afraid of jinxing it. Tradition. Tradition. Black had a tradition too. Every morning, doing one more pull-up than the day before, he mentally crossed out another day. 99, 98, 97. He wasn't rushing to get back to civilian life. He was simply executing the program. A year of service is a program. It must be completed with maximum efficiency. And then, a contract. Syria. Real work. That's what he thought a week ago. And then there was the call. His mother was sobbing so hard into the phone that he could barely make out the words. His younger sister, Mashka, 18 years old, a straight-A student, the pride of the family, had gotten into trouble. Very serious. Some bastards, money, the debts of her father, who had been gone for 5 years. His mother was confused, saying something about her being taken, that they were demanding a ransom, that they were afraid to go to the police because they're all bought off. "Serochenko, son, you're strong, you're a soldier. Do something." Her voice broke into a scream. He went to his commander. Colonel Tarasenko, a man of stone, listened to him with a stony face. "Belyaev, I sympathize with you, sincerely, but you know where we are. In 2 weeks, the final inspection by a commission from the General Staff. Your group is a showcase. Then, loading and transfer. You are a squad leader, a sniper pair, irreplaceable." "Comrade Colonel, I have a family." "Everyone has a family, Sergeant," Tarasenko snapped.
I also have a family that I haven't seen for 6 months. But there is the word duty. You took an oath. Leave is not authorized. Report denied. Go serve, Belyaev, and get that nonsense out of your head. In 38 days, you'll go home and sort everything out. 38 days. Mashka might not have an hour. That night, he didn't sleep. He lay on his bunk, staring at the ceiling, and the world was divided into before and after. Duty, honor, brotherhood, the oath. All these lofty words, which for him were not empty sounds, but the meaning of life, suddenly crumbled into dust before one simple thought. Mashka could be killed. His little sister, whom he taught to ride a bicycle, and chased away the neighborhood bullies from her. He, the elite of the army, a man capable of surviving in any point on the planet, turned out to be helpless. The system he had served faithfully had tied him hand and foot, said, "Wait." And he made a choice. At night, when the unit was asleep, he acted, clearly, quickly, as in training. The pole, petroleum, oil, and lubricants depot, the far corner of the perimeter, where the camera was malfunctioning. 20 seconds on the barbed wire, a dash across the wooded area, 5 kilometers to the nearest village where he borrowed an old jacket from a clothesline, then a ride to the district center, the train station. And here he is, in this stinky car, next to a decked-out D-mob, and every minute takes him further away from the unit and closer to a court-martial. And I say to him, "What's wrong with you, Duch? Are you out of line? Now march and scrub the nightstand until it shines." Yegor Popov wouldn't stop, telling another anecdote from his combat life. Sergei wasn't listening. He was staring out the window at the monotonous landscapes of central Russia whizzing by. His brain was working in its usual analytical mode. Objective: reach hometown N, 800 km. Time, less than 20 hours. Threats: military patrols at stations, police. An alert will be sent out within 6-12 hours. Document checks. Resources: 4,700 rubles in cash, civilian clothing, physical fitness, stealth movement skills. Weaknesses: no documents, military ID left at the unit, recognizable appearance, haircut, build, no communication. Plan: disembark from the train at an intermediate station before reaching major hubs. Switch to road transport. Move at night. Avoid federal highways. Find a way to contact his mother without using his phone. His phone lay in his pocket, switched off. He knew that as soon as they realized he was missing, his number would be immediately tracked. Turning it on would be like launching a flare. The train began to slow down. "Oh, Ryazhsk, 20-minute stop. I'm going for a beer, my throat's parched." Yegor Popov perked up. "You coming?" "No." Chorny, black, shook his head. He was looking at the platform, and he saw them. 2 in military police uniform and 1 police officer. They were walking slowly along the train, peering into the windows. Standard procedure. "Hunting for AWOLs." His heart, usually calm even under fire, gave a heavy, resonant thump. They couldn't be looking for him specifically yet. An alert wouldn't spread that quickly. This was a routine raid. But if they came into the carriage, his face, his haircut, his tense posture, he was the perfect candidate for a document check, and he had no documents. Easy, Belyaev. Breathe. Square. Inhale 4, hold 4, exhale 4, hold 4. He had done this exercise 1,000 times before a jump, before a mission, before a sniper shot. The patrol passed his window. Sergei didn't flinch. He looked at them with a reflected gaze through the glass, trying not to focus. Just part of the scenery. They stopped at the next carriage, began to climb the steps. That's it. The end. The thought was surprisingly calm. Court-martial, disciplinary battalion,
shame for the family. And Masha, he wouldn't make it. He had let everyone down. And then it struck him. The solution came instantly, like a flash. Cold, risky, the only right one. He stood up abruptly, grabbed his meager rucksack from the shelf, and headed in the opposite direction from the patrol, towards the vestibule. "Hey, where are you going?" Yegor, returning with his beer, was surprised.
"Smoking," Chorny tossed over his shoulder. In the vestibule, he pressed himself against the wall, listening. Voices could be heard from the carriage. "Show me your documents. Military ID. Where are you headed?" He pulled the door handle. Locked, of course. The train was still stationary, but for him, this was no obstacle. His fingers found a coin in his pocket. 10 rubles. He inserted it into the emergency lock release, a simple mechanism he had learned in his youth, riding electric trains as a stowaway. A light click. The door gave way. He looked outside, 100 meters to the end of the platform. Beyond that, tracks, warehouses, some kind of industrial zone. Perfect. Right in front of him, by the next carriage, stood the very patrol. They had taken some guy who looked like a draft dodger off the train and were now scolding him sternly. All their attention was there. Chorny didn't jump. A jump would attract attention.
He went down the steps like a normal passenger getting some air, took a step to the side, ending up in the shadow of the carriage, and with a quick but unhurried step, walked away from the platform, towards the tracks. Not running. A running man is a target. A walking man is just a man. Every step echoed in his temples. He felt the gazes of dozens of people on his back, conductors, passengers, pie sellers, and the patrol. He was sure they were watching him. That any moment now, a shout would ring out, "Stop!" But there was no shout. He reached the end of the platform, jumped onto the gravel, and no longer hiding, walked quickly into the maze of rusty carriages and abandoned warehouses. Only there, hiding behind a concrete wall, did he allow himself to stop and catch his breath. His hands were trembling slightly, not from fear, from adrenaline. He had survived. The first stage was complete. Now he was in a strange city, without money, without documents, without communication. And he was already, most likely, being hunted. The last 100 days until demobilization. He smiled bitterly. His 100-day mark had turned into a countdown to disaster. He looked at his hands, the hands of a soldier, a sniper, a killer, hands that should have been holding a rifle, defending the motherland. And now they would have to break locks, steal, fight in the streets, all in order to make it. He took his phone out of his pocket. The battery showed 70%. The temptation was great. One call to his mother, just to hear her voice. But he knew he couldn't. That call would cost him everything. Instead, he dialed a number he knew by heart. A number that wasn't in any address book. Ivan Smirnov's number. The other, Chorny. He didn't press call. He just stared at the numbers on the screen. His brother. His friend. What was he doing now? They had probably already reported it. He was probably standing in front of Colonel Tarasenko and saying he knew nothing. And it will be true. Sergei didn't set anyone up. But what does Ivan think? That he, Belyaev, chickened out? Ran away before deployment? Betrayed them? That thought stung worse than the fear of a tribunal. He, Sergei Black Belyaev, respected in the group for his taciturn nature and ironclad reliability, now looked in the eyes of his brothers like the lowest greenhorn who'd run from the hardships of service. He deleted the number and turned off the phone. Enough brooding. Time to act. Ahead lay a night, cold and alien, and a long road home. The demobilization album he never even started filling now seemed like a mockery from another, impossible life. His demobilization would be either a bed in the hospital next to his sister or a bunk in the disciplinary battalion. There was no other option, and he walked towards his demobilization, burning his bridges with every step. Sergei Belyaev jumped off the footboard of the reserved seat carriage even before the train had come to a complete stop. The movement was honed, springy, like a predator descending from a branch. No fuss, no unnecessary effort. His body, trained to the point of being a perfect mechanism, was running on autopilot. He landed on the dirty platform, and the old jeans and faded tracksuit top he'd bought along the way felt like a foreign, uncomfortable skin. A disguise. The train station of his hometown hit him with a cacophony of smells and sounds that he'd grown unaccustomed to over the year. The smell of chebureks, cheap perfume, dampness, and stale dirt. Noisy women with large bags, sleepy taxi drivers, gypsies looking for victims. It was all somehow flabby, rickety, lacking structure and order. After the sterile life of the unit, governed by strict regulations, this world seemed like chaos, the world of civvies, the world for whose sake he was now gambling everything. He didn't look back. He'd been taught not to look back. Instead, he scanned the space with his peripheral vision, noting potential threats, escape routes, vulnerable points in the crowd. An old man who stared too intently at his short haircut. Two shaved-headed guys by the kiosk, looking like petty thugs. Habit. Second nature. He was an outsider here, a soldier AWOL, a ghost that shouldn't exist. He was home in 15 minutes. The door to their apartment on the third floor of a run-down 5-story building was covered with the same artificial leather as 10 years ago. He pressed the doorbell, and his heart, which had remained silent during forced marches and target practice, suddenly thudded heavily in his chest. His mother opened the door. She had aged. The corners of her lips had drooped, and there were shadows under her eyes that hadn't been there in the photos in his letters. For a second, she froze, not recognizing him, and then gasped, throwing up her hands. "Seryoja! Son! How did you—" "Were you released?" He entered, embracing her silently. She smelled of valerian and anxiety. "I wasn't released, Mom. I came on my own." She pulled back, peering into his face. In her eyes was fear mixed with hope. "Good heavens. Seryojenka, is it because of Maxim?" He nodded, dropping his small backpack on the floor. Inside were a change of t-shirt, a bottle of water, and the army knife he'd instinctively tucked into his belt before climbing over the fence of the unit. "Where is he? What happened? You didn't write anything specific in the letter." His mother bustled about, leading him into the kitchen. "He got involved, the fool, with the wrong people, borrowed some money, not much, 30,000, and now they've calculated the interest. 100,000. They're threatening him. They came yesterday, kicked the door. I'm afraid, Seryoja. The police. You know our police." Sergei sat down on a stool. The kitchen seemed tiny, like a dollhouse, after the spacious barracks and mess hall. He listened, and a cold, calculating anger grew inside him. Not rage, no. Rage is an emotion for greenhorns, for the untrained. He had the anger of a professional, anger that doesn't cloud the eyes, but sharpens vision and makes reactions lightning fast. "Who are they? Names? Where can I find them?" His voice was even, unemotional. "I don't know. Some kind of scum. One of them, their leader, is Vitka Popov. He's older, looks like he's already done time. Yesterday he was yelling at the door that they'd put your Maxim on the meter, take him to the woods, break his legs." Sergei nodded. The picture was clear. A standard scheme for petty predators who prey on the weak. His brother turned out to be weak. It was unpleasant, but it was a fact that needed to be accepted and corrected. "Where's Maxim?" "He's locked himself in at Aunt Nina's. He's afraid to stick his nose out." "Call him. Tell him to come home, immediately." While his mother dialed the number with trembling hands, Sergei took out his phone, a cheap button phone bought along with the jeans. He found the only number in his contacts. Black. The ringing went on for a long time. Finally, a familiar, slightly husky voice came on the line. Ivan Smirnov. There were two blacks in their group. He, Belyaev, because of his last name and dark skin, and Vanya Smirnov, for his perpetually gloomy look and dark humor. There was no confusion. Their own people always knew who was being talked about. "Listening," Ivan said curtly. "It's me. How is it there?" There was silence on the line for a second. Ivan clearly wasn't expecting the call. "Are you crazy?" he hissed. "Has your head completely gone, calling—" "Vanya, answer the question. How is it there?" "It's quiet so far. For everyone, Black is at the training ground. Karimov's working with a sniper pair. The company commander asked this morning, and I said you left at dawn and would be back by night. But Gray, that's until tonight, until the evening roll call at 10 p.m. If you're not in your bunk, everything will come out. The company commander isn't stupid. He'll immediately realize I was covering for you. We'll both be screwed, you, either to the stockade or court-martialed, and me, at best, finishing my service in a construction battalion somewhere in the Arctic. You have until 9 p.m. to get back. Got it? 10 hours? No more. Got it. Thanks, brother. Go on. Sort out your problems." Ivan's voice softened. "And come back. Demobilization in 78 days. Don't ruin your life over some bullshit." Sergei hung up. 78 days. The 100-day mark was racing to the finish line. He remembered how he and the guys celebrated the start of the countdown, how they smeared oil on the calendar, dreaming of home, of freedom, of civilian life. And here it was, civilian life, dirty, scary, with bastards who threatened to break his little brother's legs. Maxim appeared in the doorway, tall, hunched, frightened. He was 3 years younger, but now looked a good 10. "Seryoga," he mumbled. Sergei stood up. He didn't yell or hit him. He simply walked over and looked his brother in the eye. Coldly, intently, like looking at a target before a shot. "How much?" he asked. 30 was. Now they want 100. "Who?" "Vitka Popov and his cronies." "Where do they usually hang out?" Maxim cowered under his gaze. "At Yakor. It's a cafe near the park, or in the garages behind it." "Seryoga, don't. They're crazy. Let's borrow the money. Sell something." Sergei smirked. Sell. Borrow. Humiliate himself. That was the language of this world, not his. "Get dressed," he said abruptly. "You're coming with me." "Where? I'm not going. They'll kill me." Sergei slowly turned his head. "You're coming with me," he repeated, his tone sending a shiver down Maxim's spine. "You created this problem yourself. You'll be there when I solve it. It's also part of your education." Half an hour later, they were standing near a dilapidated garage cooperative. The smell of gasoline, decaying leaves, and cheap beer. From one of the garages, with a crookedly welded iron door, came drunken voices and laughter. "They're in there," Maxim whispered, ready to bolt at any moment. "Stay here, and don't move," Sergei ordered. He walked to the door and didn't knock. He simply kicked it open with force. The door crashed open with a screech, slamming against the wall. Inside, 4 men were sitting on old car seats around a makeshift table made of crates. Bottles of beer, a bag of chips, glazed eyes. An atmosphere of cheap dominance. In the center, a burly guy, about 25 with a tattoo on his neck, presumably Popov. They froze, staring at Sergei. "Who the hell are you being so abrupt?"
Put the door back on, Popov drawled lazily, putting down his bottle. Sergei stepped inside. He didn't look around. He only looked at Popov. In Spetsnaz, they were taught, neutralize the commander, and the herd will scatter. I'm Maxim Belyayev's brother, he said calmly. Understanding dawned on Popov's face, followed by a brazen smirk. The soldier came to protect his little brother? Got leave? Well, sit down, let's chat. Your little guy owes us 100,000, plus a penalty for the broken door. Two of his buddies started to get up. Sergei didn't turn his head. Sit down, he tossed over his shoulder. There was no threat in his voice. There was an order, the tone in which commands are given in battle, and they, without understanding why, froze. You came here to give orders? Popov also rose.
He was slightly taller than Sergei, broader in the shoulders, but his mass was flabby, beer-bellied. Sergei's mass was a weaving of lean, hard muscle. I came to say that my brother owes you nothing, Sergei continued, his voice still even. You will never approach him again, or my family either. Popov laughed. Listen, Rambo, did you get completely brain-dead in the army? Don't you understand who you're talking to? I'll flatten you into the asphalt right here, and your brother... He didn't finish. Sergei made an imperceptible movement forward. Not a punch, a push, but not a simple push. His fingers, as hard as steel rods, dug into Popov's solar plexus. At the same time, with the knuckle of his other fist, he tapped him briefly, almost imperceptibly, under the jaw, in the nerve cluster. Popov gasped, doubled over, gasping for air. His eyes bulged. He couldn't breathe or shout. This wasn't a fight. It was a shutdown. Clinical, fast, effective. The other three stared in shock, first at their leader writhing on the floor, then at Sergei. One of them, the youngest, twitched, reaching for an empty bottle. Sergei turned his head towards him. His gaze was absolutely empty, the gaze of a man who had seen things more frightening than a drunken brawl in a garage. Put it down, he said quietly. The guy froze. Animal fear flashed in his eyes. He saw not just a strong guy. He saw something else, something for which there was no name in his wretched little world. Sergei squatted down next to the wheezing Popov. Listen to me carefully. His voice was quiet, almost intimate, but all the more terrifying for it. This was a demonstration. I didn't hit you. I just showed you what I can do. If I hear your name mentioned in connection with my brother again, I won't show you anything. I'll just switch you off, permanently. You understand me? Popov, gasping for air, nodded frantically. I'm not the police. I won't be filing any reports. I'll just come and do what I promised. And they won't find me. But they'll find you. Maybe. In pieces. He stood up and brushed his hands off, as if he had gotten dirty. He looked at the others. Help him up. And forget the way to my house. Sergei turned and walked out of the garage. Maxim stood outside, pale as a sheet. Let's go home, Sergei said. They walked in silence. Maxim kept glancing at his older brother. He had seen him a year ago, an ordinary guy, a bit stronger than others. Now someone else was walking beside him. A stranger, scary, calm and lethal, like the clockwork of a bomb. At home, their mother, seeing them safe and sound, burst into tears of relief. Sergei went to the window. It was starting to get dark. He looked at his watch. 6:40 p.m. He had just over 3 hours to get to the train station, catch the commuter train, and make it to evening roll call. 3 hours to transform back from a ghost into Private Belyayev, a soldier in an elite unit with an impeccable reputation. He had solved the problem. He had protected his family. But looking at his mother's frightened face and his brother's subdued demeanor, he felt not pride, but a burden, for the first time in his service. He hadn't brought peace to their home. He had brought the echo of his world into their home. A world where problems are solved quickly, harshly, and without witnesses. 78 days until discharge. Before, that number had seemed synonymous with happiness. Now, it hung over him like a sentence. He had won this battle in civilian life, but he felt that the main war, the war with himself and with the consequences of his actions, had only just begun, and its end was much further away than 78 days. Belyaev, on the double! The voice of the duty officer, a captain whom Sergei had only seen at formations before, cut through the air like a grind of metal. He hadn't been asleep. In this tiny guardroom, where he'd been placed after his return and initial interrogation, sleep was impossible. It smelled of old rags, gun oil, and hopelessness. There were no bunks here, only a cot made of planks and a dim light bulb under the ceiling that never turned off. The perfect place to break a will. But Sergei's will had been forged in other conditions. He got up in silence. His uniform hung loosely on him, and his belt had been taken away, as from a potential suicide. Humiliation. He, Sergei Belyaev, call sign Black, the best in the group in tactical shooting, who had passed a selection process that 9 out of 10 candidates failed, now stood before the captain without a belt, like a guilty recruit. "Follow me," the officer said, not looking at him. They walked down the nighttime corridor of the barracks. Silence, only their footsteps and the distant snoring from the supply company's location, those very mabutas whom he had always despised. Now, he was worse than them. They were part of the system. He was its glitch. The military prosecutor's office was as faceless as his temporary residence. A desk, 2 chairs, a portrait of the president on the wall. A major sat behind the desk, whom Sergei was seeing for the first time. A tired, expressionless face, a cheap watch on his wrist. He didn't offer a seat. He simply nodded towards the chair opposite. "Private Belyaev, Sergei Andreevich," the major read from a sheet of paper, as if he were seeing him for the first time. "Born, drafted, enlisted. Is all that correct?" "Yes, sir." Sergei's voice was even, without emotion. He looked directly into the major's eyes. A special forces principle. During interrogation, don't look away, don't fidget. You are a rock. Do you understand the gravity of your offense? Article 337 of the Criminal Code. Unauthorized absence from the unit. Up to 3 years imprisonment. In your case, given the specifics of the unit and access to information, it could be more. Sergei was silent. Did he understand? He understood that his mother was alive, that the operation had been successful, that he had been there, holding her hand when she woke up. Everything else was background noise. "I asked a question, Private." "Yes, sir, I understand." The major leaned back in his chair. The squeak was deafening in this silence. "Commendable honesty, but it won't lighten your fate. Your commanders, of course, give you a glowing recommendation. The best, elite, a hope." He smirked. "And that hope took off and ran. Do you know what that's called, Belyaev? Betrayal. You betrayed their trust." Sergei clenched his fists under the table, but his face remained stone. Betrayal. He had heard that word from his father on the phone. "How could you, Seryoga? Let down the people who were counting on you. We would have managed." They wouldn't have managed. He had seen the panic in his father's voice when he called. He knew that the money he had saved from his combat pay would have gone to the first available clinic, not the best surgeon that his army buddy had found in civilian life. "The reason for your actions?" A lazy interest appeared in the major's voice. "Girlfriend dump you? Borrowed money and decided not to pay it back? Come on, Belyaev. Surprise me. I don't want to write some cliché crap in the case file." "Tell him?"
About Mom? About how the system you serve faithfully can't grant you legally mandated leave for family reasons because important exercises are coming up. About how the report drowns in a bureaucratic swamp and time is ticking away. Sergei decided he wouldn't. This guy in the cheap watch didn't give a damn. To him, this was just another case in a folder. Family circumstances, he curtly replied. More specifically. That's personal, Comrade Major. The Major laughed, a short, dry laugh. Personal? Private? You have nothing personal from the moment you put on the uniform. Your life belongs to the state, and you've disposed of it at your own discretion. That's theft. You stole a soldier from the army, an elite soldier. It's like stealing not a Lada, but a T-90 tank. The demand will be commensurate. He pushed a blank sheet of paper and a pen towards Sergei. Write a statement, in detail, who you contacted on the civilian side, where you were, what you did, every minute. Don't leave anything out. Lying or concealing information will only worsen your situation. And remember, Belyaev, your brothers in arms are already giving testimony, and they, unlike you, want to go home peacefully on demobilization, not end up in front of a military tribunal for concealment. It was a blow below the belt, cheap but effective. The Major was trying to sow doubt in him, to make him believe that he was alone, that the brotherhood he cherished so much had crumbled at the first test. Sergei picked up the pen. Fingers, accustomed to the cold steel of the assault rifle, could barely hold the thin plastic. He began to write, dryly, in military fashion. I, Private Belyaev S.A., while on the territory of military unit, arbitrarily left the location. No emotions, no excuses, only facts. He wasn't going to rat anyone out, and he believed that his guys would do the same. The days stretched out like sticky molasses. He was transferred from the supply room to the general barracks, but not to his own, to the support company, to those very maintenance crews that serviced the unit. It was worse than a tribunal. He, Black, now slept on the next bunk to a cook nicknamed Fatty and a bespectacled signalman who everyone called Artist because he decorated demobilization albums. His status changed instantly. From the elite, who were looked at with envy and trepidation, he became a screw-up, a walking problem. The officers ignored him. Conscripts from other units looked with curiosity and gloating. Special forces, huh? Flew too close to the sun. His weapon was turned into the armory. His place on the training ground was taken by a young contract soldier. He was deprived of everything that constituted his identity. Instead of morning runs of 10 kilometers and hand-to-hand combat training, he was assigned to the mess hall. Belyaev, peel potatoes. He stood by a huge tank filled with dirty, earthy tubers. In his hands, a dull vegetable knife. Two new guys who had just arrived at the unit were snorting nearby. They still saw him as a special forces soldier, even if he was disgraced. Fingers, trained for rapid weapon assembly and disassembly for the sensitivity of the trigger, now clumsily slipped on the wet peel. Monotonous, numbing work. He peeled potato after potato, and the thought pounded in his head. 41 days until the order. Before, this thought evoked anticipation. Now, a dull ache. The demobilization order would come out for everyone. But would it apply to him? Or would his order be different, about conviction and sending to a disciplinary battalion? He saw his former comrades going to training, in full gear, with weapons. They passed by the mess hall and no one looked in his direction. Instructions. They were forbidden to communicate with him. He was toxic, contagious. But the Brotherhood of the Special Forces was stronger than army regulations.
One night, when he was scrubbing the floors in the corridor, a figure emerged from the shadows. Sergei instinctively tensed, clutching the mop handle in his hand. "Quiet. It's me." The whisper of Ivan Smirnov, the second black from their group, made him relax. Ivan was his shadow, his rival, and his closest friend. They went through selection together, did the hard work together, and were supposed to go home together on demobilization. "How are you doing, Gray?" Ivan asked, looking around. He had a package in his hands. "Fine," Sergei replied briefly, continuing to mop. He couldn't stop. The patrol could appear at any second. "Fine," he says. Ivan chuckled. "They're keeping you here like a dog." The major from the prosecutor's office shook down all of ours, tried to beat out who helped you. "And?" Sergei's heart skipped a beat. "And what?" "No one knows anything. No one saw anything. You vanished like a genie. Our commander, Karimov, is tearing his hair out, but not at you, at the staff officers. Says if it wasn't for their bureaucracy, none of this would have happened. He's trying to get your sentence reduced, so that it's at least not a disciplinary battalion, but guard duty until demobilization." Ivan shoved the package into his hand. "There are cigarettes and condensed milk here, and a letter from your guys. The mailman gave it to me." Sergei froze. A letter. He hadn't received any news since he returned. He stuffed the package inside his tunic. "Thanks, Van. Hang in there, Black. We're all behind you. Even if we act like we don't give a damn, you did the right thing, the human thing, and the system. It's not for people, it's for functions. You stopped being a function for a second, and it spat you out." Ivan vanished into the darkness as quickly as he'd appeared. Sergei finished scrubbing the floors and, hiding in the bathroom, unfolded the letter. His mother's familiar handwriting. She wrote that she was feeling well, that the doctors praised her fighting spirit, thanked him. "If it weren't for you, son, I wouldn't have been able to go through with it. Your confidence gave me strength." And at the end, a postscript from his father. "Forgive me, Seryoga, I was wrong. You're a man. Come home soon. We're waiting for you." He stood in the chlorine-reeking bathroom, looked at those lines, and for the first time during this whole ordeal, felt a lump rise in his throat. He hadn't been wrong. He'd done what he had to do. And the price he was now paying, peeling potatoes, humiliation, the threat of a military tribunal, suddenly seemed fair to him. It was his price for the right to remain not just a soldier, but a son, a human being. He crumpled the letter and shoved it deep into his pocket. He left the bathroom. At the end of the corridor stood the duty orderly, a freshie, nodding off. Sergei approached him. "Hey, soldier." The guy jumped, his eyes wide with fright. I wasn't sleeping, comrade." "Relax." Sergei held out a pack of cigarettes from Ivan's stash. "Here, and go wash your face. I'll cover for you for 10 minutes. The guy looked at the cigarettes with distrust, then at Sergei. There was surprise in his gaze. A Spetsnaz operator, the terror of the unit, was offering him help? "Thank you," he stammered, and grabbing the cigarettes, disappeared into the washroom. Sergei took his place at the duty orderly station. He picked up the bayonet that hung from the guy's belt, a cold, familiar weight. He looked at his reflection in the dark glass on the wall, a weary face, a stubborn gaze. He was no longer elite. He was just Private Belyaev, a soldier who was waiting for his discharge and a military tribunal at the same time, 40 days until the order, and each of them had to be lived, not as a function, but as a human being, even if it meant he had to peel the entire potato supply of the Russian army. The bolt clanked shut with a vile final note, a sound that Sergei Belyaev, call sign Black, was used to hearing only during hostage rescue exercises, when his team kicked down doors. Now that sound locked him in himself. The cell in the garrison guardhouse, the brig, was an insult to everything he was. 4x3 paces, bunks bolted to the wall, a slop bucket in the corner, reeking of chlorine and despair. On the concrete wall, someone had scratched a crooked calendar, crossing out the days. The last mark was on the number 24. Black chuckled to himself. He had 78 days left until his discharge. He had. He sat on the edge of the bunk. His body, accustomed to daily long-distance marches, to strains that would stop the heart of an ordinary infantryman, protested against the inactivity. Muscles forged for battle ached in the confined space. He was like a wolf locked in a rabbit cage. Humiliating. He didn't regret it. When that short, garbled message came from the neighbor, "Sergei, your mother's not well, heart trouble, they took her away. The system malfunctioned. A report, following orders, will be reviewed in due course." Due course meant 3 days. 3 days while the paper crawled from the lieutenant to the major, from the major to the chief of staff. 3 days during which his mother could die completely alone. He chose a different course, his own. A jump over the perimeter at night, a ride to the station, a train. He made it. Saw her in intensive care, pale, tangled in wires. Heard from the doctor that the crisis had passed. Sat by her ward all night, until a patrol picked him up, politely but firmly. The commander of their unit was famous for not abandoning his own, even ones like he was now. The door opened again. In the doorway stood not a sleepy yardbird conscript, but Major Popov. His commander, without a cap, in field uniform, but no less official for it. There was no anger in his gaze. There was something worse, cold, professional disappointment, like looking at an expensive tool that had broken because of improper use. "Stand." Popov's voice was quiet, but the cell seemed to shrink even further. Black rose. Not according to regulations, not ramrod straight. He simply stood, looking the commander in the eye. The elite don't fuss, even here. "Sit down, Belyaev." Popov stepped inside, closing the door behind him. He didn't sit himself, remained standing, hands clasped behind his back. "Explain yourself?" The situation required immediate action, Comrade Major. The official route was too long. "Situation?" Popov tilted his head slightly. "Every other person in this army has a situation. Smirnov's father had a stroke. Melnik's wife is about to give birth. Somehow they find the strength to follow regulations. Maybe because they're soldiers, not egoists?" The word egoist hit harder than a fist could have. In their brotherhood, it was a brand. "My mother was alone. No one else." The neighbor called. Black replied briefly. He wasn't going to make excuses. He was explaining his motive, not asking for forgiveness. I know everything already," Popov said, pacing the cell. 2 steps there, 2 back. "I spoke with the doctor. She's stable. And I spoke with your neighbor. You left her money. You withdrew every last kopeck from your account. Well done. Prudent. Only who didn't you think about, Belyaev?" Black remained silent. He knew the answer. "You didn't think about the group. The final district inspection is in a week. A demonstration performance. Who's going to take your place in the assault duo? Some greenhorn who hasn't learned to hold his rifle steady? You've let everyone down. You've wiped out months of training. You, our best fighter, our pride, turned out to be the weakest link." The major stopped directly in front of him. Icy rage swam in his eyes. "Do you know what you're facing? Article 337, desertion, up to 2 years in a disciplinary battalion, or, if you're lucky, a court-martial and a suspended sentence, with a wolf ticket for the rest of your life.
No law enforcement agency, no government service. They wouldn't even hire you as a security guard at Piotr with that kind of record. Did you think about that when you were jumping over the fence? I was thinking about my mother, Black repeated. Everyone thinks about their mothers. Popov raised his voice for the first time. But we wear shoulder boards. We have a duty. You took an oath. Or are those just empty words for GRU Special Forces? Were you counting down the days until demobilization like some green recruit? There were less than 100 left, Belyaev. 78 days. You would have left a legend, with thank yous, with recommendations. Every door would have been open to you. FSB, Alpha, Vimpel. A contract in Syria, for Christ's sake. Money, career, respect. You traded all that for one night at a hospital bedside. Was it worth it? Black slowly raised his gaze.
Yes. Popov looked at him for a long time, studying him. Then his face became impassive again. Your fate is being decided at the top. I've done everything I could. I softened things as much as possible. Character references, reports. I mentioned your deployment, your accomplishments. But you spat in the face of the system, Belyaev, and it doesn't forgive that. Wait. He left without looking back. The bolt clanged shut again. Black was left alone. The Major's words hit their mark. Brotherhood. Duty. The future. He understood all of it. He himself lived by that code. But the moment he heard about his mother, that entire code, all of his elite status, all of his service, collapsed into a single point. And in that point, there was only her. The days in the hole flowed like a sluggish stream. Wake up at 6, lights out at 10. In between, pointless drill on the parade ground, cleaning toilets, and endless waiting. His fellow inmates were the same kind of troublemakers, a drunk contract soldier, a conscript who stole a phone from a fellow soldier, a couple of hazing victims caught in unauthorized relationships. They looked at him with apprehension and curiosity. A former Special Forces soldier in the hole. That was an exhibit. He did everything in silence. He scrubbed the toilet bowl with the same methodical persistence with which he cleaned his sniper rifle. He marched on the parade ground, stamping his feet so hard the asphalt vibrated, stunning both the prisoners and the guards. He wouldn't allow himself to break. His body was here, in this dirty pit. But his mind was on the scout trail, calculating options, analyzing mistakes. There was only one mistake. He hoped that his status would grant him an indulgence, that an elite fighter would be forgiven what a simple infantryman wouldn't be. But the system was faceless. It ground everyone up the same way. A week later, he was allowed a visitor. In the visiting room, across the table, Ivan Smirnov, a.k.a. Doc, was looking at him. His friend, the medic from their group. Doc looked tired. Hi, Black. He slid a pack of cigarettes and a lighter across the table. Here, the head of the hole allowed it. Said if you don't smoke, at least you can have them. Thanks, Van. Sergei took the cigarettes. He had quit smoking back in training, but the gesture was important. How are things there? We're doing badly, Seryoga, Doc sighed. They put in a young guy instead of you. He got tangled in the grappling hook on the assault ladder, almost took down the whole group. Moose is tearing his hair out. Says without you, we're not a group, but a craft club. Black grinned wryly. Victor Melnick, Moose, their machine gunner, a 2-meter mountain of a man with a good heart, always said what he thought. What's the Major saying? The Major's silent, walks around like a thundercloud. He's riding us so hard the ground is burning. Seems like he's taking it out on us because he can't take it out on you. They were silent for a moment. How's your mother? Doc asked. She's doing okay. They moved her to a regular ward. She'll be discharged in a week. That's good. Ivan nodded. Listen, Seryoga, there are rumors going around about a disciplinary battalion. Is it true? I don't know. maybe a disciplinary battalion, maybe a court-martial. They're not telling me. Doc looked at his hands, calmly resting on the table without a single nervous movement. "Do you even realize what you've done?" he asked quietly. "Your whole life, everything you were working towards. I understand that if I hadn't gone and something had happened to her, I would never have forgiven myself for it, and no Alpha and no Syria would have fixed that." Ivan Smirnov looked at his friend for a long time. He saw before him not a broken prisoner, but the same Black, confident, laconic, having made a decision and ready to take responsibility for it. Only something new had appeared in his eyes, something that hadn't been there before. Some kind of mature, profound heaviness. "All right, you just hang in there." Doc got up. "We're waiting for you. Everyone's waiting. Loss asked me to tell you that if they send you to the disciplinary battalion, he'll fly right after you. For beating up a young soldier, for example." Chorny allowed himself a weak smile for the first time in many days. "Tell Loss not to be an idiot. Someone has to teach the new guys some sense." The visit was over. Back to the cell, back to the smell of chlorine. But Doc's visit had made things a little easier. The Brotherhood hadn't turned away. They were angry. They didn't understand. But they hadn't betrayed him. That was important. Another 2 weeks passed, 78 days until discharge turned into 59. The calendar on the wall, scratched out by some unknown predecessor, was finished. Chorny started scratching out his own, next to it, just to keep his hands busy. And then one day the door opened again during the day. A strange captain from the unit headquarters stood on the threshold, along with 2 guards. "Belyayev? Sergei Andreevich?" the captain asked formally, looking at his papers. "Yes, sir." "Get your things together. You're leaving." His heart skipped a beat. Where to? The disciplinary battalion? Transfer? He silently gathered his meager belongings. A change of underwear, soap. They led him out of the guardhouse building onto the sun-drenched parade ground. The air after the stuffy atmosphere of the cell hit his lungs, making him cough. The captain led him to a UAZ pillbox van standing by the gate. "A decision has been made regarding your case, Private Belyayev. Considering your previous merits, positive references, and family circumstances, the command has met you halfway. No criminal case will be opened." Chorny was waiting for the catch. The system never forgives, just like that. "You are discharged from the Special Forces unit," the captain stated, "for an act that discredits the title of a Special Forces soldier. For further service, you are transferred." He looked at the order. "To the 3rd Motorized Rifle Battalion of the 102nd Separate Brigade, as a BMP driver-mechanic." There it was. The blow. Not with a fist. Not with a charge. Worse. The 3rd Battalion. 3 times penalized, as it was called in the unit. A collection of all the troublemakers, alcoholics, refuseniks, and just plain idiots who couldn't be placed in normal companies. A kingdom of hazing, theft, and window dressing. Infantry. The very bottom of the army hierarchy, which he, the elite, despised with all his soul. They hadn't imprisoned him. They had simply demoted him. They had turned a wolf into a stray dog. "Do you understand everything, Private?" the captain asked. Chorny looked at him. Then he glanced at the distant roofs of his barracks. His group was there now. His brothers, Loss, Doc. They were preparing for an inspection. And he would go to hell for conscripts. The remaining 59 days until discharge were turning from a wait for freedom into a sophisticated torture. "Yes, sir," he replied dully. He was pushed towards the UAZ. The door slammed shut. The car started, taking him away from the world of professionals, brotherhood, and honor into a world of ordinary barracks, stupid orders, and meaningless existence. He leaned back against the hard seat and closed his eyes. Everything was reset. His service in the Special Forces was over. Now just service was beginning, and that was worse than any tribunal. Here, Belyaev. Sign here and here. Sergei Belyaev, nicknamed Kyorny, silently took the offered pen. Fingers, used to the cold steel of the assault rifle and the rough texture of tactical gloves, awkwardly squeezed the thin plastic. He scribbled his signature on the receipt for the documents and dry rations. The final signature. The captain in the duty officer's window handed him his military ID in a hard red cover and a sealed package with his personal file. "You're free to go, soldier. Don't speak ill of us." Sergei nodded without raising his eyes. He turned on his heels, as if on the parade ground, and headed towards the exit with a clear, marching gait. The door creaked behind him, but he didn't turn around. It was over. The final chord was played not on the training ground, but here, in the stuffy storeroom, with a stroke of a pen. Those last 100 days, which he once thought were an eternity, had compressed into a tight spring and shot him out of the unit's gates. Ivan Smirnov, the other Kyorny, was waiting for him at the checkpoint. He was standing, leaning against a concrete block, smoking, and flicking ash into a rusty tin can. He was wearing the same uniform as Sergei, only without a duffel bag, and the anxious gleam in his eyes. Smirnov still had 6 months until his discharge. He had arrived 6 months later. "Well, Citizen Belyaev?" Ivan smirked, throwing away his cigarette butt. "Is the ground shaking under your feet?" "I'm getting used to it," Sergei said shortly, shifting the strap of his duffel bag to his other shoulder. Inside was a brand-new civilian outfit, a couple of souvenirs from Syria that he had managed not to lose after that incident, and a demobilization album. Empty. He never found the time or desire to fill it. They were silent. There was nothing to say, and at the same time, everything. About that night, when Sergei, receiving a fragmentary, panicked call from his mother, bolted through the fence. That week back in his hometown felt like a full-blown military operation, extracting his younger sister from a gang of thugs, explaining to a couple of local authorities that their methods of persuasion didn't work on him, and seeing not just fear, but terror in his mother's eyes at what he had become. Then the return to his unit, where the intelligence officer and the commander were already waiting. A difficult conversation that could have ended in a court-martial, but instead ended unexpectedly, with a deployment. "You've let us down, Belyaev," Major Popov had said then, looking him straight in the eye. "But you're a specialist, and you solved the problem like a specialist. So either you sweep the parade ground until the order comes through, and then get discharged for non-compliance, or you fly out for 3 weeks to where your skills are needed more. You'll earn your demobilization back. Choose." Sergei chose. 3 weeks in Khmeimim flew by in a single breath. Perimeter security, escorting convoys, 2 short outings with a reconnaissance group. There was no time to think about home, about his sister, about the court-martial. There was only work. Clear, understandable, deadly work. It burned out the last vestiges of doubt and civic reflection. He came back different, even more silent, even more black. "So, Ivan coughed, breaking the silence. "You going to show us the album when you fill it up, at least?" Sergei looked at him. At the other black. That's what they were nicknamed in the company almost immediately. Sergei, for his dark hair and gloomy, unsociable character. Ivan, for the same dark hair and his caustic black humor. 2 blacks in 1 platoon, an army paradox. "I'm not filling it up," Sergei replied. Nothing to stick in there. What do you mean, nothing? Smirnov was surprised. What about the training grounds? What about Syria? You're a hero, for crying out loud. Came back, didn't tell anyone, did your job, and now you're going home. Anyone else would be making up legends about themselves. It's not a legend, Vanya. It's work. Ivan Smirnov sighed. He was the only one who knew the whole story. He covered for Sergei when he went AWOL, lied to the duty officer that Belyaev was sick and in the medical bay. He waited for him. All right, hero. He extended his hand. Take care. Write sometimes. Tell us what it's like back in the civilian world. They say people smile there for no reason, and they don't walk in formation. Sergei shook his hand firmly. The handshake was short, strong, like a blow. You take care too, Black. Don't screw up. I'll try, Black. Ivan grinned. It was the first time they'd called each other that to their faces. It sounded like a password, like a recognition. Sergei turned and walked down the broken asphalt road towards the bus stop. He didn't look back. He knew that Ivan Smirnov would be standing at the checkpoint until he disappeared around the corner. That was the custom of their little brotherhood. The demobilization train hummed like a disturbed hive. It smelled of alcohol, cheap sausage, damp socks, and boundless drunken happiness. Soldiers in brand-new civilian clothes were yelling songs to the guitar, telling war stories, calling their mothers and girlfriends, bragging over one another. That's it, I'm done. I'm coming home. They were like school children bursting out for summer vacation after a long school year. Sergei Belyaev sat by the window on his side bunk and watched the passing landscapes. He didn't drink, didn't sing, didn't participate in the general uproar. He was an outsider here, an island of cold silence in the middle of a raging ocean of joy. The other demobilized soldiers eyed him warily. Someone, the bravest from the neighboring compartment, tried to sit down with a bottle of cognac. Hey, buddy, why so sour? It's demobilization. Come on, join us. Where are you from? Special forces or something? You look awfully serious. Sergei slowly turned his head towards him. He looked at him the way he looked at the new recruits on the training ground when they couldn't perform the standard for the 5th time. A look that expressed nothing but assessment of distance, threat, possible actions. The guy immediately deflated, muttered, "Sorry, just being friendly," and retreated to his own group. No one approached him after that. He was the same kind of demobilized soldier as they were. He had also been counting down the days. He had also been dreaming of home. But that unauthorized absence, that choice between duty and family, had changed everything. He had crossed a line beyond which the simple joy of "I'm going home" no longer existed. He was going home, but the army wasn't letting him go. It was inside him, in his posture, in his habit of sleeping in snatches, in his way of scanning the space, in the cold calm that others mistook for anger or arrogance. He took his military ID out of his pocket, opened it. Belyaev Sergei Viktorovich, Private, MOS, Scout. The Participation in Combat Operations section had a neat stamp and an illegible signature. That stamp had cost him a court-martial. That stamp was his redemption. The last 100 days. He remembered how he and the guys in the barracks had started a demobilization calendar. Every evening they crossed off another day. 99, 98, 97. It was a game, a ritual. Then, when there was less than a month left until the order, he stopped crossing them off. The days flowed differently. The conversation with the major, the Il-76 transport plane, the dusty, sweltering air of the Syrian base. Night duty, when the horizon trembled with distant explosions, the smell of gunpowder and hot metal, quiet, businesslike conversations with the contract soldiers for whom this was simply a job. They didn't look at him as a hero or a penal battalion conscript. They looked at him as a specialist. Black, cover the sector. Black, report the situation. Black, check out that ruin over there. And he covered, reported, checked. He was just doing what he'd been taught all year. And in this work, he found a strange, perverse solace. There, everything was honest. Here's the enemy, here's the task, here's the price of failure. No shades of gray, no agonizing choice between family and regulations. The train lurched and began to slow down. Dismal industrial zones, garage cooperatives, and panel apartment buildings floated past the window. His city. He didn't take a taxi at the station. He slung his duffel bag over his shoulder and walked. Through the station square, crammed with minibuses and bustling people, along streets familiar from childhood. The civilian world was deafening. Bright signs, loud music from cars, laughter, women's voices, a child's cry. It all seemed unreal, a backdrop. He walked, maintaining a steady pace, back straight, eyes forward. Passers-by instinctively gave way to him, sensing something alien hardened in this short-haired guy in a simple black jacket. Here was his courtyard. The same old playground with the peeling rocket, the same bench where he had his first kiss, and the same entrance where, 3 months ago, he'd broken the arm of the bastard who'd gotten his sister hooked on some kind of trash. The memory was sharp, like a freeze frame, the crack of bone, a shriek, his own icy calm. He felt no anger, no rage then, only cold expediency. The threat had to be eliminated. He stopped in front of his apartment door. He hesitated for a second, listening. It was quiet behind the door. He didn't take out the key that his mother had put in the last letter. He pressed the doorbell. An eternity passed before he heard footsteps behind the door. The lock clicked. His mother opened the door. She had aged. Deep shadows lay around her eyes. More gray had appeared in her hair. She looked at him, and her face contorted for a moment with a complex mixture of fear, relief, and boundless love. "Seryoja," she breathed, and tears streamed from her eyes. She clung to him, buried her face in his shoulder, and shook with silent sobs. Sergei, awkwardly, with one arm, hugged her. He stood in the middle of the hallway, huge, straight as a post, and stroked her hair, not knowing what to say. He had forgotten how to say words of comfort. He knew how to act. "It's okay, Mom. I'm home." His sister, Katya, peeked out of the room, older, thinner. There was no longer that empty, glassy look in her eyes, only fear and a timid hope. She stood, not daring to approach. Sergei looked at her over his mother's head, just looked. And she understood everything. He wouldn't yell, wouldn't reproach. He had already done everything. He had paid for her mistakes. Late in the evening, he sat in his room. His mother was bustling in the kitchen, preparing a festive dinner that he didn't want. His sister sat quietly in her own room, pretending to read. The house lived its new, fragile life, which he had won back for them. His room seemed tiny, doll-like, posters on the walls, a computer desk, a stack of old magazines, the world of the boy he had been a year ago. He went to the mirror and looked at his reflection. An unfamiliar man looked back at him from the mirror, short-haired, with harsh lines around his mouth, skin weathered on training grounds and burned by the Syrian sun. But that wasn't the main thing. The main thing was his gaze, calm, attentive, heavy. The gaze of a man who knows that the world is not divided into good and bad. It is divided into tasks and their execution, into friend and foe, into those you must protect and the threats you must eliminate. The last 100 days until demobilization. He thought it would be a straight shot to freedom, but it turned out to be a minefield that had to be crossed, and he crossed it. But every step left its mark on him. He opened the duffel bag and took out his military ID. He put it on the table next to an empty demobilization album. These were two symbols of his service. The album, a memory of what he was supposed to become, a cheerful, demobilized soldier with a bunch of army photos, and the military ID, proof of who he had actually become. Black. He was neither a hero nor a criminal. He was a soldier who had done his duty. First, to his country, and then to his family. And the second duty turned out to be much more terrifying. Sergei turned off the light and lay down on the bed without undressing. He closed his eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. It wasn't the rumble of the demobilization train in his ears, but the quiet whistling of the wind on the roof of the 9-story building in Kamemim. He had returned home, but a part of him remained there forever, in the army, in that war that won't be written about in the demobilization album.